Hello everyone, welcome back into another stream of Last Protagonist, reacting to a bunch of random lore videos and videos that aren't always related to lore. So, hope you're doing well. Yesterday on the stream, we finished off watching Silent Ellipses videos about the Grand Unified Theory of Elden Ring. Part 3 with Duality and the Shadow. Then part 4 was Cosmology and Vision. Today I have queued up, let's talk about hidden boss health bars in Soulsborne games by Berto Please. Then this one's been on the list for a while. Curious as to watch it, but just haven't gotten around to it. The level design of Bloodborne, Hemwick, Charnel, because obviously I'm a really big Bloodborne shill, by Leap Gaming. Then we have Elden Dorks. Miriel's Secret solves oldest lore mysteries, Elden Ring lore. Then Mojo plays 10 Elden Ring theories that might actually be true because somebody wants to inflict psychic damage onto me, in their own words. And the last video for tonight will be a little bit different with Godwyn is Not Godfrey's Son by Living Jar Cletus. So, welcome back in. Dookie Stain, The Mania, Elden Enthusiast, Iman, Platinum Chip, how's it going? Lovely, very calm music, surely nothing sad about it. My intro music? Nope, not at all. Okay, so guys, let's go ahead and figure out what
Send yourself back to
is happening with these hidden boss health bars in Soulsborne games. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have a lot to say. By Berto Please.
2016, when you're first playing through Ashes of Ariandel, the first DLC of Dark Souls 3. You're at the final boss of the DLC.
Joke's on him, I didn't play this game when it first came out. I was a little bit too busy and then came back to Dark Souls 3 a couple years later. I'd forgot I even purchased it. And then I saw it was on my PlayStation account. I was like, what? Well, I just saved myself $60.
Sister Frida. After a while, you beat her first phase, and since you already watched the reveal trailer, you fully expected her to have a second phase, because it showed Father Ariandel going haywire during it. And I mean, come on, you're playing Dark Souls, am I right? Sure enough, a cutscene plays, showing you what you saw in the trailer. But what's this? Frida gets back up. The trailer didn't show her in frame at all, so to your surprise, this turns out to be a dual boss fight, akin to Ornstein and Smough all those years ago. You realize they share a health bar, so you don't need to individually kill them, and focusing Father Ariandel is a better strategy because he's the one that follows you for melee attacks.
I can't tell if YouTube's having issues or if it's just the frame rate of the video itself right now. And Chungus Toad, welcome back in.
And Sister Frida approaches you more slowly if you stay away from her, but does have some long distance delayed attacks, so you do have to keep on your toes. And also cast a healing spell, so you have to occasionally break away from Ariandel to focus her. You struggle for a while, but then you finally get him down. You get a Titanite slab, a little disappointing, but sure. Wait, did I ever get the Era 5?
Yeah, I do think getting the Titanite slab is another way to throw players off, thinking that there's going to be an additional phase.
Pause right here.
You're welcome. Hey guys, it's the Glowmite Queen. She uses Black Flame, but she doesn't have the Godslayer Greatsword.
Depending on what kind of player you are, how long you've been playing the games, etc., this is where you branch off into two different thought processes. You're either freaking out and super excited, the madman finally did it, he gave us the first genuine 3-phase boss fight in the series. Or, you groan in disappointment, realizing that From Software has finally jumped the shark, becoming some sort of anime slob. Now, I'm not here to tell you that it's definitively one or the other, but it'll ultimately be up to you to decide for yourself. What I will do is break down how the hidden boss health bars were handled historically in the modern From Software games, the few different ways it was implemented, and the pros and cons to all the methods they've done. Because believe it or not, yeah, there's more to discuss than simply just whether a new boss health bar pops up or not. The earliest example I could find of a hidden boss face in the modern From Software catalog.
I know, this has to be YouTube. Bro, what the hell?
Actually the only one there is in Demon's
This is terrible. Not playback speed. Quality.
Souls, being man-eaters. If you're unaware, the boss itself doesn't
I should have figured it had to be with full screening. I have no idea why it's like this.
particularly have any change in
I know, it's
pattern
just
or what have
YouTube.
you. But once enough time passes, or you reach a certain threshold of the man-eater's health bar, a second man-eater will...
Hi, man. You said Dustborn inspired you to read Battle Royale. I like that novel by Koshun Takami. Made you vomit? His game ideas seem fine, but concept beneath it is terrible. In many ways, Battle Royale is kind of inspired by classic literature such as The Lottery, but taken to like a more extreme. Yeah, they also made a movie out of it, which is fun. I do think the novel is a bit better, though. Let's beat Takashi's finest work. Hey, Chadwick.
Boss health bar that wasn't shown prior to this point. Being that this is the first and only time that this happens in this game, it undoubtedly is intended to be a shock and increase the stress of the player, given the first boss is already difficult and aggressive in itself. And now there's a second one coming in to wreck you, while the other is likely still alive.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by the man-eater. The first time I fought it, he was kind of kicking my ass, but I was starting to get a handle on the fights because I was trying to not fall off, which had its own difficulties. And then I was just not happy about a second one spawning in. It's like, my favorite recurring joke about the Soulsborne games is that I could beat anything as long as there's only one of those things.
This is certainly effective in accomplishing that, but due to the narrow arena, and there only being one obstacle to split them up, not to mention both are as aggressive as the other, an execution definitely is an excessive boost in difficulty at best, or borderline unfair.
Right, I guess because it's going to be stuttery even in not full screen mode, I may as well just suffer through full screen.
At worse. The only real way to mitigate it is having enough damage and aggression to defeat the first one before the second can be a problem, which most new players won't be able to do. Being that this is the first attempt at doing something like this, it certainly is easy to give them a pass for.
I'm sorry, but the wrinkles on the shirt making the hunter look extra stubby is kind of funny.
For it, especially when looking at it in retrospect, as we'll very shortly see another attempt at this format that worked much better. I do want to mention that although this is the only boss with a hidden health bar, there's a few bosses with second phases. The first one I want to discuss being Storm King, which follows a somewhat traditional two-step fight format, in that you have to kill 6 of the smaller storm beasts flying around before the big one will come down and be in range of being attacked. But the storm beast health bar was shown the whole time after you enter the boss arena, and won't take direct damage from killing the smaller beasts, so you'll be clued into the fact that there's more to the fight. In this case, it's formatted like this more so in order for you to find a way to damage the flying enemies before you have to deal with the full threat. A more low-key example is Flame Lurker. He doesn't have a change in his moveset, but he does become noticeably more aggressive once he passes the halfway point of his health bar. And he also gets brighter overall, so the idea being that he's being enraged, I suppose. And lastly, you could say that the Dragon God has 3 stages to this fight as well, given you have to traverse his arena to fire off ballistas to immobilize him, before being able to damage him yourself. By now, I hope the distinction between a second phase and a hidden health bar is clear, because they will be important later on. Not all second phases are a hidden phase, but all hidden phases are a second or third phase. And they certainly all look very different per boss. And by the way, I won't mention every single second or multi-phase boss in this video if it doesn't have a hidden health bar. They'll mostly serve as a reference point. Looking at Dark Souls 1 now, here's where we see the example I mentioned earlier where they improve on man-eaters for a more rounded boss fight, being the Bell Gargoyles. Before the fight starts, in the cutscene you can see that there's 2 gargoyles in the tower, or at least 2 that don't look like they're actual stone, being a possible clue that there's a second one that will come in later, so that'd be a potential hint to Eagle-Eyed players to be on their toes. Though I imagine any Demon Souls players would see this coming a mile away, especially if they do see the other one. Once the fight actually begins, it's a similar setup in that...
Yeah, I don't know how fair that is just because you don't like fight 6 of them, but yeah, after the second one came down, I was like, oh no, is there going to be a third? No, they saved that for the sequel in Dark Souls 2. I mean, you're saying the forward direction dodging and rolling in Demon Souls is pretty killer on that bridge? That's probably one of the tougher sections of the game, provided you don't cheese jank the man-eater's AI or just use pyromancy and kill it in one spell. Do you think that's an official shirt or an Etsy job? It's probably like an Etsy job, because if you go to the Bandai Namco like store page, they hardly have any apparel. I think they added more to it somewhat recently. I think I was looking at it like a couple months ago when we were first hearing about Night Rain's network test, and I saw some stuff, but I wish it was easier to like license stuff like that and make your own merch and not, you know, open yourself up to legal problems, but I digress.
The first gargoyle has to be damaged enough for the second one to show up, but only then showing the second health bar. In this case, there doesn't seem to be a timer. Regardless, this is where the similarities end mechanically, as the second gargoyle coming in has a much more restricted AI in order for the fight to be more balanced. For instance, he is much more likely to use a sweeping fire attack rather than use melee attacks. The second one also comes in with half HP, not being as brutally demoralizing, and yet still adding another layer to the challenge if you were already struggling with the first one. And given this has proven to be a wall for a lot of first time players, despite not being as rough as man-eaters, it still works as an obstacle to overcome, I think. However, when I think about this game, I'm sure there's another fight that comes to mind even more so than Bell Gargoyles. Of course, I'm talking about Ornstein and Smough. The way this dynamic duo is set up has been analyzed to death. I suspect you won't hear anything new from me that you may not have heard already. I've even talked about it myself already. But given the subject matter of the video is more so on the hidden boss health bars, here's something that might have been lost in the conversation from time to time, and something I may have a small critique about actually. Despite me loving this fight all around, I've always been unsure on how I feel about how the second phase is handled. We surely all know that you essentially get to pick how the second phase goes, by killing the other boss. So for instance, if you kill Smough first, you get to fight a beefed up version of Ornstein, and vice versa. And that in itself is great. But one small thing that always bothered me is how the damage you dealt on the other boss that isn't felled will be fully negated on this additional second phase, because the boss will regain all their HP. You could argue that this will only be a problem once, and then you just have to adjust your tactics accordingly. And while there's some truth to that, that doesn't really apply when you consider how many attempts someone could potentially have been doing a strategy, where perhaps they weren't focusing on any one boss. You were instead taking careful pot shots at whoever was closest when the opportunity arose. You can certainly also argue that trading off damage between the two isn't optimal, as it's just a harder way to fight the boss. You're essentially going to have both of them nearly the entire boss fight, but I think that's why it bothers me. If someone is taking the time to fight both of them at the same time, the likely objectively harder strategy that requires more patience and manages to do it, you will essentially punish this player the hardest once they realize it was for naught, when it's a clever strategy.
He's not wrong, but Dark Souls 1 is not known for being user-friendly, exactly.
In its own way. At this point, say if the second phase still happened, you could have the super version of the boss still have at least some of the cut damage on it, so it could nearly circumvent the second phase. Or perhaps if you literally kill them both within a few second time frame, you could end the fight early, and maybe even get both souls as a reward for your tenacity. If this boss is already going to have a choice where you can pick which one to fight as a final phase, why not go a step further without punishing a certain playstyle as well, you know? I can't say I particularly remember how I did it the first time. I think I was focusing Smough being the bigger target and easier to hit, and I would occasionally hit the other boss if I found an opening. But I don't recall being overly frustrated about Ornstein getting his HP back. Maybe just some slight annoyance. But from there I obviously adjusted my playstyle. This is simply a scenario I've thought about here and there throughout the years. Like I said, I still greatly like the fight, and it's one of my favorites in the series. This is more so food for thought more than anything. I will say, I do think there's at least one fight later on that did the Ornstein and Smough formula just a little bit better, but we'll discuss that when we get there. These two would actually be the only boss fights with outright hidden health bars, but to quickly look at other noteworthy multi-phase boss fights. In a similar vein to the Man-Eaters and Gargoyles comparison, Dragon God also got another attempt in Dark Souls in the Bed of Chaos, being another 3-stage fight where you can't harm the boss itself at first, but unlike the other ones, this one could arguably be worse, depending on who you ask. And lastly, I want to bring up Sif, as this is a unique case where there's a second phase of sorts, but instead of making the fight harder, Sif actually gets noticeably weaker, as she starts limping after you reach a small threshold of the boss fight. Obviously this is more intended as a gut punch moment to make you consider your actions in the narrative, rather than a mechanical choice, but it's an interesting contrast to what we've seen so far, and certainly for what we're going to be seeing later on. I hope it's become clear that so far, the second phase thing has been used extremely sparingly.
If anything, the second phase for the Sif fight is by far the worst. the frame right now. The worst boss phase in all of FromSoft history, making the dog limp. Just hurts me more than it does the boss, maybe. Ennui intensifies. Ennui. I just forget how that's actually pronounced.
You roughly have 4 bosses in both of the previous games, and only 1 or 2 contain a completely hidden boss health bar per game. So diving into Dark Souls 2, they start using the phase 2 trope a fair amount more. I counted 8 bosses with 2 phases, though given that there's nearly double the number of bosses in Dark Souls 2 than there is in 1, perhaps it's not disproportional. Despite all this, I only found 2 bosses that have a fully hidden health bar. The dual cat fight with Ludden Zolan and Burnt Ivory King. Yes, I had to get footage of Ludden Zolan. You can thank me by becoming a member of the channel with less than $1.20. What's interesting about both of these hidden boss health bar examples, however, is that both of these are somewhat telegraphed. For Ludden Zolan, you can literally see the second boss in the background if you're paying attention, similar to how the Bell Gargoyles worked, and even more.
Yeah, I think that one is more fair with the caveat that it does not feel very fair trying to get here in the first place. It's just really tedious and annoying, and I hate it. Hey, Global, welcome back in. This is straight up why you can't play Monster Hunter. Could you elaborate? It's because you just can't see like the boss health bar or anything like that?
More prominently, due to it being a black cat that contrasts against the snow. And given it's just another cat fight, like the one you already did earlier in the DLC, no doubt you'll suspect something is up with this one regardless. Doesn't make the fight good or anything, but at least it's somewhat upfront about it. And for Burnt Ivory King, despite working the exact opposite of Storm King, the health bar not being there at all until the boss shows up, it functionally accomplishes exactly the same thing. You have already crossed the fog gate, the arena is too epic to just be a room with a bunch of relatively normal enemies with no health bar, so undoubtedly you expect the boss comes later, once you're adjusted to the situation at your own pace. I suppose you can make this as an argument there aren't any true hidden boss faces or something, especially the latter, but given the difficulty that these pose already, and being endgame content, it's surprisingly merciful in this regard, especially for Dark Souls 2. Now Bloodborne is definitely where things start to get interesting because, well, from this game onward, what boss didn't have at least one extra phase on it? I looked through all of them, excluding challenge dungeons, and it's easier to list what bosses didn't have a second phase.
It's kind of funny because... Hold on, let me see that list
excluding
again.
challenge dungeons, and it's easier to list what bosses didn't have a second.
Oh, yes, never mind. Didn't have a second phase? Oh, he means just a second phase at all, not hidden phase. I got distracted by this. Yeah, is there a one phase boss in that game? Oh yeah, Celestial Emissary is kind of a messed up one.
Some of these include Cleric Beast, Vicar Amelia, and Moon Presence, though these last two kinda do. They just mostly have an additional attack or two once you reach a certain threshold, which definitely complicates this a little bit.
Hey Pepe Gale Sage, welcome back in. So Global, you can't play Monster Hunter? Oh, it's because they start limping at low health. You're like, you're the monster there? Okay, I see what you mean. Because I was talking about Sif.
Constitutes a second phase starts to get a lot more nebulous as we go on. Thankfully for our purposes of the video subject, the hidden health bars are mostly cut and dry, and Bloodborne only has one as far as I could see. Again, excluding challenge dungeons, which even then I think it's only like one. But aside from that, it's only the Witches of Hemwick. This one falls in a similar vein as Man-Eaters and the Bell Gargoyles, as the second health bar only shows up later on, but whenever you kill the first witch. I say only similar because in reality, this isn't the same kind of fight. It's a bit of a puzzle situation, and the second witch is actually there the whole time. You can fight her, and even kill her before the first one without showing the second health bar. So it's still a little bit different and interesting in its own right. Now finally reaching Dark Souls 3, definitely the genesis of the topic for me, as during the timeline of this game's release is when I actually started to think about this topic more deeply. On a similar note as Bloodborne, it's easier to note the bosses that didn't have a second phase or more, and the only two I found are Wonir and Ancient Wyvern, which yeah, what a catalog, huh? As for bosses with hidden health bars, I counted a record-breaking 7 in Dark Souls 3, including the DLCs, and we'll be looking at each of them individually. The first one you're unavoidably going...
Yeah, I think, especially around the time of Bloodborne, it almost became the point where you started to expect a lot more gimmicks with the bosses, even kind of towards the end of Dark Souls 1 especially. And I guess like Dark Souls 2, a lot of the bosses are more vanilla in their presentation, so it's not as big of a deal. And this problem isn't really just limited to FromSoft. And as I was playing Kazan, I was like, wow, I'm dealing a lot of damage to this boss. He doesn't seem to have a lot of health. He's probably going to have either a second boss phase or another health bar. And, yep, that's kind of a thing. You just kind of develop a sense for the intended difficulty sometimes, and I also definitely had that happen with Elden Ring as well.
Going to encounter is the Abyss Watchers. Just to break it down real quick, the fight starts up as a solo fight, but within a few seconds, you see a second Watcher rise up and start ganking you with the first one. Then after some more seconds, a third one rises, but instead of attacking you, it most likely will attack the other two Abyss Watchers, though it can attack you directly if you are the closest target or if you hit it. This all happens within the same health bar, though the second and third Watchers don't affect the main health bar, it's only the first one. Once you knock out the first Watcher, regardless of the other two, they all fall, and one singular Abyss Watcher will rise up one more time with a new fresh health bar and an expanded moveset, though it still largely is similar. Given this is an equivalent sore spot for many first time players like the Bell Gargoyles, and that it's an early-ish boss that stonewalls some players, not only has more than one opponent, but also a second health bar, I do think it's a perfect spot to discuss a broader point that has only truly become applicable so far, but will be a strong criticism point going forward.
Alright guys, I'm going to try to refresh the page and hopefully this fixes things. So we're at 1306 if it gets lost.
Target, or if you hit it. This all happens within the same health bar. Healing methods have been fairly loose. Demon Souls has multiple grasses that you can use to heal, and can stack and farm them as necessary.
Seems a little bit
better.
better.
Has a more restrictive Estus
Wait,
Flask
no, now it's
system,
better.
which
It
made it
worked.
better for not spamming healing items, especially in boss fights, but also for exploring. But even this system has its own quirks, such as being able to have up to 20 flasks, and you can also use Humanity on top of that to fully heal as needed, though the animation left you much more vulnerable than Estus. Dark Souls 2 had limitless flasks, but it also had life gems, which act much more like grass in Demon Souls, and sort of negates what they were trying to do in Dark Souls 1. And finally, Bloodborne has a generous cap of 20 heavy healing items, blood vials, and it's very restrictive to have more healing than that. My point in saying this is that
Now, to be fair, you also have the rally mechanic, which can give you a lot of healing on top of your normal heals.
generally speaking, you have more than enough healing items for any encounter. It's more so about finding good places to heal when you need to than anything. In Dark Souls 3, you could say healing took its final form, which has lasted up until the current day with Elden Ring and stuff, which is simply that you will get more Estus Flasks as you find more of a specific item by exploring. And additionally, there's another item that gives you more power to each flask drink as you gain more HP as well. If you played these games a long time, especially these newer ones, you've probably gotten a gist that once you waste enough flasks on an early stage of a boss fight, that attempt you're currently on is basically null, because you have much less room for failure as the fight goes on. At its worst, people usually just let the boss kill them so they can reset the encounter and try again with a hopefully better attempt.
And to be fair, that made a lot more sense with games like Demon Souls and Bloodborne, where you would need to refarm your healing consumables, and Dark Souls 2 to an extent with the Radiant Life Gems and whatnot.
Now, the way I'm framing this may make it sound like it's bad design or a bad habit from players. It's not. Until you introduce hidden health bars. Starting with Dark Souls 3, more so than ever, having hidden health bars may introduce a genuinely debilitating frustration point if you've been hard stuck at a boss for a really long time, having limited healing, and then finding out there's a hidden face to it that you couldn't have accounted for prior because it wasn't part of the initial health bar. If found in this situation and healing was a problem, in Demon Souls you could farm them, in Dark Souls 1 you could kindle the bonfire from your flasks, in Dark Souls 2 you could buy more life gems, and Bloodborne it's a little more tight, but you could also take advantage of rallying and stuff. So it's not often a problem, I think. But for Dark Souls 3, it can certainly become a problem. Let's use Abyss Watcher specifically as an example. You start.
So Global said, 2 phases make sense from a game design perspective for really hard bosses, because the first phase teaches you basic movements, but you get how making single phase bosses would mix things up more. Well, not only that, I think some people don't really like having the hidden health bar and kind of being blindsided by certain bosses. To be fair, I can kind of understand where Berto's coming from with this, because when I was playing through Sekiro, I was really struggling against a certain guardian, if you know what I mean, and once I found out that there was more to its boss fight, I was like, damn, I am not prepared. Illidan.gif.
Start off the game with 4 flasks, assuming you don't use any Ashen Flasks at that. By this point in the game, you can find 5 more flask shards, so you can have a max of 9 flasks while fighting Abyss Watchers, with little other means of healing, and even less of the bone shards that increase the healing, at only 3. Now I do want to make it clear that I'm not saying that hidden boss health bars are bad for this reason. I'm mostly posing this as a severe con to them that should be considered going forward, at least for the first time you reach a hidden phase. From there you could adjust accordingly, and you could use other methods to boost your chances, like upgrading weapons. And Abyss Watchers themselves aren't super tanky bosses. Upgrading weapon and damage is probably what you should do if you're struggling with them. But I think the psychological effects of this shouldn't be lost in the conversation either. These can be extremely hard games for first time players, so if you reach a point where the frustration overcomes a sense of accomplishment, which is what these games are intended to achieve, then the effect just backfires on themselves. After that long-winded monologue, let's look at the rest of the Dark Souls 3 hidden health bar bosses. You actually don't see another one until the end of the game basically, first one up being Lothric and Lorien. This one falls in the somewhat obvious category, due to you predictably having the gist that Lothric may be involved once you down Lorien, and it just turns out to be an expansion of Lothric's moveset, so it's actually somewhat more merciful than if you had an entirely different fight to learn. The only other detail is that Lorien does get revived indefinitely if you only focus on him, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could predict that happening, given that it already happened once. So you probably do have the gist that you need to kill Lothric at the very least. Next one up is Nameless King, yet another fight that you can probably see coming as a two-faced boss fight, given the rider is shown, and you can't really reach him with your attacks, so no reason to believe he'll die alongside the dragon. The last one for the base game is Soul of Cinder, which isn't specifically telegraphed to have a hidden face, but if there's any boss that you can probably guess has one, it'd be the boss that is gated behind the 4 lords, you know? So I suspect it wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, with the 4 lords all embering up, it would kind of make sense that the Soul of Cinder would ember up as well, but at least that fight is mechanically challenging enough if you don't do the DLCs that it can catch people off guard.
Given their endgame status, you could probably argue you're much better equipped in healing than something like Abyss Watchers, being at a max of 15 flasks. And the telegraphing on top of that probably makes it much more palatable that there's more to it than meets the eye. But shortly after that, we finally wrap around back to the beginning of the video. Of more or less...
Well, people aren't going to have like the max amount of flasks when they get to Abyss Watchers because it's still like a very early game boss. So I don't remember exactly how many flasks you have at that point, but flask management is important, yeah.
Let's already describe how this fight is formatted in the beginning, so let's just jump right into it. The problem I described during Abyss Watchers is literally twofold with Sister Frieda, having not only a second hidden phase, but a third one as well.
There.
The first boss in the series to go this far. Now I should acknowledge that we have had plenty of 3-stage boss fights already. We've already mentioned a few before with Dragon God and the Bed of Chaos. But if you want to ignore those due to the nature of those fights, we don't need to look that much further after those. Even as early as Dark Souls 2, we have both of the Smelter Demons, which both have 2 different buff phases. One where they ignite their body and start giving you chip damage when you are nearby, and the second when they ignite their sword. If you want to ignore even those, in Bloodborne, Father Gascoigne, the first mandatory boss, has their starting phase, to a 2-handed axe form, which has a fairly distinct moveset, and then the wolf form. There's actually plenty of other examples in Bloodborne if you want to look even further, but my point is that we've had 3-phase bosses already, but whether they're hidden as a surprise health bar afterwards or not makes the whole difference. So do I think Sister Frieda is a little flawed due to this? Maybe a little bit, yeah. With Abyss Watchers I already described that they're a little bit squishy, so you have a good amount of options to get through them eventually. While you could theoretically encounter Frieda super early given the DLC entry point is early in the game, it's not until you have endgame gear and levels that it's actually somewhat of a balanced fight, if we're talking first time players. So there's not much you can do to improve your standing outside of just getting better at 3 whole separate boss fights, with substantial differences and not small health bars. Otherwise the other move at this point is just googling a build that's strong against her, which there are plenty of options, but once you start resorting to changing your build in an RPG, maybe there's room to reconsider some things. The only other boss in this DLC also has a hidden health bar, with Champion's Gravetender. Yep. Given it's just a guy with some wolves at first, you can predict something will happen afterwards, and sure enough it does. But it's not that interesting or unique at this rate, so moving on. Now I think FromSoft acknowledges as a potential flaw, because after Ashes of Ariandel and their follow-up DLC, Ring City, for one they only had 1 boss with a hidden health bar out of 4. But the rest of the bosses sort of went back to having a single health bar and simply hiding their phases within the single health bar, like Gascoigne as we discussed earlier. Still allowing for some surprise, but not crushing your spirits in terms of healing distribution. Theoretically this is the best way to avoid the problem that was more prevalent in Dark Souls 3, but it does admittedly have its own drawbacks. Yeah. So I will admit that this character isn't fully leveled for DLC. I don't think he even had max level weapons, but it doesn't look much different even with a properly leveled character. I mean, hell, if you look at the same character fighting Frida, even this makes it somewhat evident. So what's my personal assessment of this method? Well, it's certainly the lesser of two evils. It allows you to know how to manage your healings right off the bat, and it just takes the first hit for you to do on the boss to realize it's gonna be a little bit of a grind. And I think I'm willing to give it some leeway given it's the actual last piece of content you're intended to do in Dark Souls 3. Which to some degree I'm also okay giving Frida grace. I don't think it's an awful fight or anything, but when looking at it from a first playthrough perspective, I definitely have more problems with one than the other. Do let me know what you think. Do you like the hidden boss phase setup, or do you prefer it to be in a single health bar? At least in Ring City. Obviously the bosses don't have to be tanks to begin with.
Yeah, I was curious if he was going to bring up a Sekiro. He does.
And if you have any memorable stories from any of the bosses like Sister Frida, positive or negative, I'm happy to hear them. But before moving on from Dark Souls 3, let's discuss the one exception from the Ring City DLC, Demon Princess. To briefly go over it, this boss starts out as a dual fight where the bosses pass aggro between each other periodically, very clearly telegraphed with visual and audio. And you do have to kill them both individually, before the last one you kill rises again, stronger than before, as the final phase. And depending on which you fell, they'll have a different special moveset, but it's only between 2 or 3 attacks. You could argue that there was a hint to this last phase in the reveal trailers of Ring City, similar to Ashes of Ariandel, since what they do show is the Demon Prince, but their design doesn't change enough to be super clear that this is the case. I will mention, and maybe you've already seen it by now, but even these guys are a little tanky, especially in that final phase. But I will admit that I have a soft spot for this fight because I find it incredibly cleverly balanced and very fair in almost all aspects that I personally don't mind how tanky they are, on top of having their final hidden phase. If you recall earlier, I mentioned one boss that I thought did the ONS formula better, at least mechanically. Well, this is the one. Admittedly, this fight is more tailor-made for that strategy, because of how the two bosses will trade off aggro, so it's not like ONS could straight up take the strategy and work as well, and it's certainly.
And there's kind of also a little bit of a setup for this between the old Demon King and even to a lesser degree like the Abyss Watchers. So them kind of merging into one greater demon doesn't seem as far out of left field, or at least it didn't to me.
Certainly not as iconic as ONS, but I just appreciate it tons. If you want to hear my expanded thoughts on the fight, I discussed that in the same video I alluded to earlier. This actually isn't where the conversation ends when it comes to different methods of how the game has handled it, because Sekiro had its own solutions when it comes to hidden health bars. Now I will say that it still has some bosses with undeniable health bars, we'll look at that shortly, but if you're unaware, every single boss and mini-boss in this game has anywhere from 1 to 3 dots above their health bar. This is essentially signifying how many boss health bars this boss has, and given there's 2 separate methods to defeat a boss, be it by opening them up to a lethal attack by draining their posture, or by lowering their health bar to 0 as usual, and both requiring a deathblow attack to knock out a phase, it certainly fits this game's mechanics well. These deathblows can vary whether it means that they'll have different movesets or not for the second or third phase. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It just varies per boss. Despite the system, there are still a handful of bosses that hide at least one additional health bar. The first one accessible that will have this, and likely the one of the first bosses you encounter, is Lady Butterfly, who only appears with one deathblow marker, but once you blow it, she will reveal you are essentially fighting an illusion. I suspect most people will think something is up with this, because even the mini bosses up until now all had a second deathblow marker, and this boss had a cutscene and everything, so you can imagine that it is special in some regard. Not to mention you do find snapseeds prior to this that talk about illusions, so that could be a subtle hint as well. Maybe if you could hurt her with a snapseed in phase 1 or something, that'd be another additional good hint, but you're limited on seeds this early in the game, so I don't imagine they want you to waste them either.
Yeah, I always hated how limited the snap seeds were, because you could only get like 3 or 5, and there's no way to get more at that point in the game. It's kind of dumb.
Genichiro is the next one you're likely to encounter, and a mandatory boss at that. This one might come much more as a surprise, because it has the traditional 2 deathblow markers, and when he busts the second one, he rises again with a near entirely new moveset, and even a new game mechanic that's admittedly a little weird to fully grasp at first, and introducing it during a hidden third phase is a little bit mean in that regard. This is a boss that I very clearly remember being frustrated when I found the hidden phase, because I had been struggling so far to get him down. And I should mention that Sekiro follows the same health template as Dark Souls 3, so pretty much any problem you could point to in Dark Souls 3 would also apply to Sekiro in that regard. Mind you,
I wonder if he's going to get to the point, but I do think there's a time and place to have the hidden health bar mechanic. And as frustrating as it is to actually face that with Genichiro, I think it makes sense in the greater context of the game, but I'll wait to go on my whole diatribe about that a little bit longer at least.
This game does much more than the rest just demand that you improve at its mechanics, as it's not really an RPG like Dark Souls, so you can't switch builds or what have you. You can only improve your health or damage depending on how many bosses and mini-bosses you encounter, and if I remember correctly, I'd done a good amount of the other main story bosses I could before this, and I still struggled. So, Guardian Ape is the only other one you'll find before the endgame, and this one is particularly devious because it's the first boss, and possibly the only one in the entire series, that gives you the corresponding victory achieved message, completely lulling you into a false sense of security that you killed the boss, but then brings him back to life. Even Frida didn't do that if you recall. Now I'm sure this is at least in part, probably in major part, to bait players as you'd expect, but it's also in part used to introduce the idea that there's some entities that are immortal if they are infested by the centipedes, even if you may have already been exposed to this in other areas. I know some people really struggle with this boss and had the same experience that I did with Genichiro basically, so you can certainly levy that against it too, especially given the death message, and the fact that his moveset completely changes after this point, although it follows a more traditional parry fight. Personally, I didn't struggle much with the first phase, so it didn't hit badly. I actually quite enjoyed that they went that far to get us, the Madman. A lot of good reaction complaints just came out of it back in the day, but just the same, it is a potential criticism.
Yeah, I remember when Sekiro first came out, and people were trying to be very careful about not spoiling the second phase of the Guardian Ape fight for streamers because of how well the game sets it up. And so just to see people like lose their minds collectively at the Guardian Ape reanimating was pretty wild. So in some ways that kind of does feel a little bit unfair from like a mechanical standpoint, but I think it also serves a lore standpoint, which kind of gives it the begrudgingly okay in my book. And sometimes, you know, people like to be surprised. The only bad thing about being surprised is once you're surprised once, it's much harder to become surprised again. And very quickly, the exception proves the rule. And then this is why every boss has multiple phases now, or even multiple health bars.
They kind of get you again with this same boss by having a second boss come out of nowhere in the rematch once you blow away the first marker. Now, I think I have much more of a problem having a dual fight in this game than the hidden health bar, because the mechanics didn't work as well for that kind of encounter. But at the very least, you don't have to kill the second ape to defeat the encounter, and if you choose to, she's super squishy compared to Guardian Ape. So, moving on. The only ones left from here are essentially endgame bosses, and two of the ones we already looked at are optional bosses, so the game doesn't abuse this too much at the very least. If you took the Shura ending route, your last boss will be Emma, who only has one deathloop marker, so you can fully expect there to be more at this rate. And sure enough, you fight Ishin with his own 2 deathloop markers. If you go for any other ending, you will encounter Divine Dragon, which if you recall, starts out the fight with these smaller dragons, which is pretty easy, so likewise you probably expect it to be a second phase. And this one being more of a spectacle fight, pretty easy, so likewise you probably expect it to be a second
I only just realized it doesn't even have a death blow marker, so that's probably supposed to be another hint.
phase. And this one being more of a spectacle fight, it's not necessarily the hardest either. And lastly, you got the last fight for the other 3 endings, where you initially rematch Genichiro in his last phase from the last encounter, which you most likely know pretty well by this point, and having many more hours into the game since then, it probably won't be that much of a problem to get through. And you can expect there'll be more just as well. And sure enough, Sword Saint Ishin shows up with 3 additional deathblow markers, which if you want to be technical, it's the first 4-phase boss fight in the series. Not just by hidden phase, but just phases in general, I'm pretty sure. And Ishin does have different movesets for all of them, so there you go.
Yeah, Sword Saint Ishin is just ridiculous, man. I still really struggle with the 3rd phase just because it's a long, grueling fight. To be fair, although it is kind of annoying fighting Genichiro so often, you eventually just get so good at him that he becomes like a bit of a non-issue. So it's just a little bit of a slog of a fight, but nonetheless, it's still like really mechanically challenging and an engaging one, at least for me.
There's certainly something to be said about having the hidden phases used sparingly, so it can still land with the intended effect and not be essentially expected every time. And thankfully, it'll continue to be used like that going into Elden Ring. So finally, looking at the big boy, we're mostly going to be looking at the main bosses. As you know, the boss roster for Elden Ring is humongous, so I don't want to bore you with bosses that, let's be honest, most of us don't care about anyway.
See, I don't know why the frame rate is just terrible again all of a sudden. It's got to be Zyro's fault for jumping into the stream. Anyway, hey Zyro, welcome back in. How's it going?
Reinala is the first one that has a hidden health bar, and this was likely a lot of people's first Soulsborne game, so it may have been a surprise for more people than before. But given the gimmicky nature of the fight, you can maybe assume that it'll be more, especially when Reinala is one of the main bosses of the game. Next up is Rykard, which might be more effective as a surprise. Despite it also having a gimmick to it, it still very much acts as a normal fight in practice, so it's fully possible it'll get players. Once again, we still have the same Dark Souls 3 healing template, just a reminder. After this, it's not until the very end of the game where we have more, first with the infamous Malenia. Due to her difficulty, I'm sure many people actively hoped that she wouldn't have a second phase.
I think I screwed up and for some reason thought that the special Spear of Light type ability only worked as a weapon art. So I actually had a little bit of trouble facing the Phase 1 Rykard my first couple times playing against it, because I didn't try pressing R1 or R2 because I didn't expect them to actually do anything.
But got that slap into reality once she did. I'm conflicted about this one for similar reasons as Ring City and Frida, in that she's obviously intended to be the ultimate challenge of the game, even more so than the final bosses. Certainly by word of mouth a lot of people know that, so a hidden phase probably should be expected, but as it stands now, even her phase 1 being as difficult as it is for first time players with waterfall and the like is quite insane. I guess I'm just happy she didn't have a third one, because with that she would be considered horrid by pretty much everyone I think. Not only that, but her second phase also isn't a full HP bar. She starts off with roughly 3/4 full.
So I would actually say that Malenia definitely does have at least 3 or 4 phases, if you consider a phase to be when a boss's moveset changes at a certain health threshold, because she doesn't try to grab and impale the player up until she's at about like a third of her HP. Although typically she doesn't start using it until she's a little bit lower than like 60% or about half health. Sometimes she just pulls it out really early, and it's kind of hard to say why. Or no, it's not the grab, it's waterfowl, duh. Like, the real fight against Malenia doesn't start until you start to see her using waterfowl dance.
I guess to actually talk about something different in this Elden Ring segment, let's discuss a preconceived notion that doesn't necessarily have to be the way it is. If you recall a bit of chaos from Dark Souls 1, I mentioned how I had a 3-stage fight, right? In that one, you had to hit some branches on both sides of the arena in order to open the way to the vulnerable bug, in a similar-ish way to Dragon God. Well, one thing that makes this fight unique, in pretty much the entire series, as this has never been done again to this day, is that this is the only boss where if you were to die or quit out after already having completed a segment of the boss, it will actually stay how it was when you come back. Perhaps it's because they realized how shitty the boss was more than anything, and just wanted to be a little more merciful. But it does show that FromSoft has on occasion made exceptions, and doesn't have to stick to the format for every single boss. Honestly, for some bosses it'd probably just be a quality of life, in the sense that getting through one of the phases can sometimes just be boring. Like think of
Yeah, I was gonna say, I could imagine skipping over Ganishiro to fight Sword Saint Ishin. That'd be really cool. What other good boss candidates would be to like skip their phase 1? Malenia. Malekith doesn't have 2 HP. So yeah, I felt like Malekith, they did it wrong. I felt as though he would have been better off having 2 health bars, just because he kind of dies pretty quick. Like you're both glass cannons in that fight. Grafted Scion, or do you mean Godric himself? I guess I was probably too high of a level when I fought Godric, so I never really had a problem killing him to even worry about phase 2.
Nameless King or Sword Saint Ishin, where the first phase isn't even that much of a problem, it just feels like padding to the real boss once you relearn to destroy them. But I'm sure something like that would be appreciated for some bosses like Malenia, where both phases are sort of extra, so putting them together is exhausting. The only one after her is Radagon and Elden Beast, who I'm sure we could all see coming.
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely. This fight, I felt as though... Actually, I think this might be a little bit controversial, but it's probably not. This is probably one of the coldest takes. That I think the Moon Presence should have been able to be fought as her own standalone Wait, no, you don't have to fight Gehrman every time. Never mind. For some reason, in my head, you have to kill Gehrman and the Moon Presence in one life, but that's not true. It's just that the Moon Presence is so weak that as long as you know how to fight the Moon Presence and like break its limbs, it doesn't really pose that much of a threat, unfortunately. Elden, you feel like a lot of people are over-leveled when they get to Fortisax? Are they over-leveled, though? Because, I mean, by the time you get to that point in the game, you're already getting past the Valiant Gargoyles, which are pretty rough. If anything, the Valiant Gargoyles are probably tougher than Fortisax. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, though.
For the final boss, just like Soul of Cinder, even if Radagon is difficult in his own right. I mean, hell, maybe some people wouldn't even mind having Radagon be skipped to get clean attempts at Elden Beast.
Yeah.
Especially at launch when Elden Beast was even more annoying. But then again, some people prefer fighting Radagon anyway.
Oh yeah, I forgot you could pull out Torrent now for the Elden Beast fight. That has to be such a game changer.
Lastly, I just want to honorably mention Regal Answers of Spirit and True Moog, who both have only one health bar, but they do actually heal a portion of their health bar at some point. So in a sense, it works somewhat similar to a hidden health bar. To me, this doesn't feel as bad for some reason, even though I'm sure seeing the boss heal is a bit demoralizing, so you can certainly poke this idea with holes. I mean, that's one of the things that some people don't like about Malenia, that she heals herself when she hits you. But at least that one you can avoid or mitigate by dodging the attacks properly. Meanwhile, the other two are somewhat unavoidable, unless you destroy.
I think one thing that annoys me about the Malenia heal is that she gets healed to full even while you're guarding, when typically if you block an attack, that's not how it works in like game design in general. Fastened Carrot, welcome into the stream. And then Elden Enthusiast and Without Horns, welcome back, by the way. You gimped yourself against 40 the last two playthroughs, because otherwise he's such a pushover compared to what's before him. You like that? Global, you think the first Ancient Dragon in Fair Missoula is way harder than Fortisax? Really? I don't know. I feel like Fortisax can have some tricky stuff with the Deathblight buildup. But, I mean, at that point, I just had such dragon fatigue that I kind of hated the first Fortisax fight. Oh, wait, no. The first Fortisax fight really pissed me off because of how arbitrarily they made the Ancient Lightning come off of its feet if you tried to melee it. And I hate the first Fortisax fight. It is such garbage to play as a melee character. I'd rather have, like, the dragon bring its head down and grab me as I'm trying to hit its feet, rather than just have some, like, random lightning pop out of it. Iman says the hardest dragon is both the magic ones. Are you talking about Smaragd and Rani's one? Adula? If anything, the hardest dragon right now is Senisax, the one before Bale. Ancient dragon, that is. They spam spells like when mages start to. Okay, yeah, so Smaragd and like Adula and whatnot. I didn't really have too many problems with them. The ghost dragons in the DLC gave me more problems, as well as what's his name? X-Sykes, if you try to fight him really, really early.
Destroy them before they can do it. Also, fun fact, Godfrey 1.0 version had his second luchador phase be a hidden health bar as first, but obviously they changed it once the game released. And lastly for the video, the Scattertree avatar was the only boss with a truly hidden health bar in the entire Shadows DLC. The rest were in the singular health bar. And even then, this boss fight was still somewhat unique from the rest of the examples, as when you knock this boss down to 0 HP on their current bar, it'll give you a chance to riposte them to have some HP off of the next phase be shaved off ahead of time. Depending on your position when you killed it, you may not have noticed the first time. I definitely didn't. But once you know the second phase is there, you may be more observant the next time around. That's not it, however. You can repeat this process one more time for the second third hidden health bar in the series. But not one that feels absolutely demoralizing, because what's more, this boss felt like it had decently scaled health bars. It certainly seemed more squishy than the rest of the bosses in the DLC to this point even, so it's not overtly obsessed with that shock value factor, I think. And well, that's all the bosses with a hidden health bar. I hope that's giving you something to chew on if you hadn't thought about it deeply yourself, but if you've ever been unmotivated to keep fighting a boss further when you get jump scared by a hidden phase, just know you're not alone. And there could be some legitimate things to pick apart about this whole idea. And I think even FromSoft agrees, given how it approached them after Ashes of Ariandel. And how they always...
Ironically enough, although this wouldn't be ironic if you guys ever saw my 1.0 playthrough when I fought this certain boss with a certain strat, the boss that gave me the most trouble in the DLC, aside from Radahn, would be the damn Deathrite bird in Karo's Hidden Grove, because it could one-shot me. Granted, I was there kind of early, but that was also when I wasn't using any of the blessings, so it didn't really matter. I didn't use any of the blessings up until Radahn, because once I got to Radahn, I'm like, okay, I've seen everything I possibly could. I'm just not going to take the time to try to deal with this, because this is just kind of dumb. And it was, so I didn't, and I won. Second try after that, so anyway.
tried to spruce them in here
Oh yeah, Hitbox Hippo was really bad for me too. Ugh.
and there instead of every single boss having them, even major ones. But yeah, that's all for the video. If you'd like to see more videos of me breaking down some game mechanics in the Soulsborne games, the Elden Ring, the DLC, or even a small review of the network test for Night Rain, I do have a full playlist with things like that. It also includes that one video where I talk about dual bosses in the entire series. I suspect that would be of interest to you if you made it this far into this video, because I break more the mechanic of having two bosses in one single arena, more than, you know, phases and stuff like that. Next up after this, I do have a little series idea that will be somewhat different from all the content I made so far, even this one or prior to that. But I think if you like this video, you might enjoy aspects of that video too. I don't want to reveal too much, but it's a fun idea, I think. And I hope it turns out well and that people enjoy it. It will be about Elden Ring specifically, and maybe the DLC right after that if it goes well. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, do consider subscribing. As I jokingly said earlier, you can also become a member and join these fella right here if you would like to support my channel. Again, it's like 99 cents base, so it's taxes and stuff like that. Your name will obviously be there, and you can also get early access to videos. Like this one was probably going to be done like a week early because I have plans when it's actually released, but I wanted to have it done early. And then I might even have the other one ready not too long after as well. So if you want early access to videos, that can be anywhere from a day or two to weeks ahead of time, depending on.
That one said the edits jumping around are kind of rough. I don't think that's the edits as much as my YouTube just having absolute garbage quality playback. Like the FPS is just in the single digits. It's terrible.
How much ahead I am. But yeah, how are you deciding?
See,
to
like look at
continue
that. That's
browsing my
not
channel?
how people
I appreciate
move
it.
or
And I
edit.
hope to see you again, everybody. So
God, YouTube is pissing me off. Like we fixed it for like 2 minutes and then it became terrible again. Anyway, I did like this video, even if it was a little bit, yeah, you can blame me, blame my internet, blame the YouTubes itself, blame Yowlaser, as always. I've linked Berto Please's video into the chat if you guys want to give him some support. I did like the video, even if it was a bit basic. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It was pretty fair, more factually based than like an opinion piece, an editorial, if you will. So anyway, with that one out of the way, let's go ahead and check out Level Design Mastery with the level design of Bloodborne Hemwick Charnel by Leap Gaming.
Recently, I saw a video that ranked all of the areas in Bloodborne.
Bro, it's this video too? Okay, I gotta like mess with YouTube settings again or something. Because after I did that and then refreshed it, it worked. Wait, what? Playback. Let's try this
Recently,
again.
I saw a video that ranked all of the areas in Bloodborne from worst to best based on a fan vote. And I was genuinely shocked.
See, now it's
when
fixed
I saw
slightly.
that Hemwick Charnel Lane, Bloodborne's creepy take on a rural witchy village, showed up just a couple minutes into this video, landing at number 19 out of 20. This ranking fascinated me. Hemwick is one of my favorite areas in the entire game, and I think there's so many things it does well with its design. And while Bloodborne contains a lot of fantastic and memorable levels, ranking this one as second to last kind of blew my mind a bit. What's even more fascinating is...
Sorry, I forgot the captions.
that I had already been planning out a script for this video before I saw these rankings, which means that I was dumb enough to think people would want to watch a video about the design of a level they hate. But, you know, I'm too far in now. Might as well just go through with it. So here's the unwanted level design of Bloodborne, Hemwick Charnel Lane. Bloodborne is full of engaging, diverse.
So how do you guys feel about Hemwick's level design? I honestly think that the level design of Hemwick Charnel Lane is pretty damn good. I don't think it quite meets the highs of Central Yarnum and Cathedral Ward, but I definitely think it's quite up there as far as like not being too intricate, having pretty good shortcuts and whatnot. And yeah, I'm curious why people dislike it so much. Maybe because of like how linear it is for the most part, but I don't know. It's much better if you don't count the first bit before the lantern, the bit with the graveyard. I definitely know what you mean by that. It can be annoying to go through there, but I kind of like the tension that it brings with all the snipers and whatnot. And what I mean by liking it, it's not as though I particularly enjoy playing through that part always, but it keeps me on my toes, and I think tension adds to the game rather than detracts, believe it or not. Hey Mal, welcome back in. Zyra says the immersion is great. Yeah, that's true too. It's a good level, but the theme of the place itself is not your cup of tea. That's fair. Just, you know, make sure you pour in your corpse ashes into your cups of tea, y'all.
And cleverly designed spaces. From the moment you open the gate into Central Yarnum at the start of the game, it quickly becomes clear that FromSoft's trademark level design is not only intact here, but it's one of the stars of the entire experience. Hemwick Charnel Lane is actually one of the many optional areas in Bloodborne. You can complete the entire game without ever coming here, but you'd be missing out on a really unique part of the world if you do. It also proves to be vitally important from a gameplay perspective, as it's here in these witch-tainted lands the player receives an item that allows them to utilize runes to improve their character. And lastly, it serves as the entry point to another optional area, and one that ranked much higher on the list, Cainhurst Castle. So while Hemwick isn't required reading, it's about as close to crucial supplemental material as you can get. But what is it that makes its design so impressive? The short answer is that it excels at both the environmental and technical sides of creating a level that feels good. So let's start with that first piece and take a look at how FromSoft created one of the most atmospheric and aesthetically engaging locations in all of Bloodborne. To understand what makes the atmosphere of Hemwick so impactful, it's important to recognize what comes before it. The entrance to Hemwick Charnel Lane is found through a side path off of the Cathedral Ward, specifically around the side of the Grand Cathedral. So by the time the player gets to this point, they've
I like how there's a sign that says Hemwick that's just virtually completely illegible.
traveled through Central Yarnum, at least a portion of the Cathedral Ward, and possibly Old Yarnum as well if they stumbled into that path. All three of these areas paint a picture of different neighborhoods of the city of Yarnum, each of them a denser, more urban-like environment consisting of streets, alleyways, bridges, and plazas surrounded by Bloodborne's trademark Gothic architecture. And each one does a remarkable job creating separation from one another both in their layouts and their visual styles, but they all still decidedly feel like three pieces to the same puzzle that is the inner core of Yarnum. Comparatively, Hemwick Charnel Lane is something entirely unique. It's here on this pathway leading to Hemwick's entrance where the player feels, perhaps for the first time, like they've escaped Yarnum for a bit, entering the outskirts and revealing that there's much, much more to this world than we first imagined. Hemwick Woods, the space that connects the Cathedral Ward to Hemwick Charnel Lane, is our first indication that things are different here. This open wooded area is crawling with rifle-carrying villagers and their hunting dogs, leaving open the question of what they're doing there. Are they out hunting beasts, like so many of the villagers we've seen so far? Or are they perhaps guarding the entrance to Hemwick, ensuring no one makes it through to uncover its secrets?
As for that, I think it's probably easy to say that these dudes are most likely guarding the entrance to Hemwick, since all we have are the women folk within Hemwick and none of the men folk. I guess there are brick trolls and executioners. Never mind, I'll shut up.
It's a substantial change in atmosphere, and it bolsters the already strong world building found in Bloodborne up to this point. The first time you enter Hemwick, it's likely you'll have some variation of the thought, how strange, and immediately begin to wonder what exactly this place is and why it's here. Hemwick's arrangement of rural trailways and small houses give it a distinct off-the-beaten-path feel, signaling an eerie departure from the previous areas in the game. The first group of villagers we encounter are also a stark contrast to other enemies we've seen so far. When you stumble upon them, clearly in the middle of some kind of ritualistic state, they seem far too preoccupied with their own business to notice an outsider like you. But of course, with a little prodding on your part, they turn out to be just as aggressive and bloodthirsty as the rest of the lot. Further down the path, we venture into a short indoor area through a series of connected shacks that open out onto these rooftops overlooking the water. A hauntingly beautiful vista in a game that has no shortage of stunning environmental imagery. Now is also a good time to point out that Hemwick benefits from Bloodborne's time cycle maybe more than any other area in the game. The time of day you visit these outskirts can drastically change the mood of the entire area, as its skybox is largely more visible than in...
Yeah, I'm really impressed that he brought that into consideration as well, because if you... I'm sure he's going to bring this up in a moment, but if you come here early enough, like go here before Cathedral Ward, which many people do because it makes the transition into fighting Amelia a little bit more smooth. But you're not going to run into the, I almost called them the Honored Madmen, but what are they called? The Wandering Madmen. Wait, is that what they're actually called? The hallucination boys that you fight with the Witch of Hemwick. They don't appear during the sunset phase of the day, but they do show up when you get the full moon aspect of the night after you kill Amelia and whatnot. Hey Stella, nice to see you again.
Other regions, and plays a prominent role in setting Hemwick's visual tone. It's past these rooftops you'll gain access to Hemwick Crossing, the large plaza-like area filled with executioners patrolling and
Oh man, this dude's mouth noise is annoying me.
dogs prowling. One of my favorite visual touches in this section of the level is just how different it can look, simply depending on which direction you're traveling. A quick run up the hillside reveals the building that houses the Witch of Hemwick, this region's boss encounter. Their arena has an undeniable creepiness that matches the rest of the level, its large basement room broken down and beaten up over years of neglect, and ultimately leading to something sinister on the other side. Hemwick in general follows a cohesive, well-established visual theme. Its exposed, almost disfigured trees are an identifying feature throughout each area. Its overgrown stonework can be found in pathways, walls, and structures alike, and its alarming excess of grave markers consistently intrigue the player with more questions than answers. The views of Yharnam's other regions far off in the distance remind us that while we're most certainly somewhere outside Yharnam, we're still surrounded by its imposing presence. Bloodborne's artists did such an excellent job combining the natural landscape with Hemwick's man-made components that this village truly feels like an organic extension of the land, not a deliberately designed route through a video game. All of these features, all of these small environmental touches, all of this careful planning results in an area that is incredibly atmospheric, both inviting the player to seek out its mysteries, but also to be cautious when doing so. Hemwick Charnel Lane feels removed from the majority of Yharnam, but that isolation clearly comes with its own sources of trouble. It is one of the many levels in Bloodborne that is intoxicating to explore, each bit of it distinct and crafted with a purposeful care that results in extraordinary pacing through a mysterious new area of the world. So let's keep that in mind as we move on, because while Hemwick is dripping in an atmosphere that elicits feelings of mystery and uneasiness, it's also a textbook example of FromSoft's approach to the structural components of level design.
So you guys are talking about how Cainhurst itself can kind of feel a bit tragic. I would agree with that, because I think part of the reason why a lot of people like Hemwick is because it leads into people's fantasies about like noble vampires, aristocrats, castles in a more gothic setting, Dracula homages galore, and Hemwick doesn't quite meet that, and Hemwick feels a little bit oppressive. It doesn't quite feel tragic. It feels fabricated isn't the right word, but like there is a tragedy to it, but it feels self-inflicted, whereas like the tragedy of Cainhurst doesn't seem to be self-inflicted as much as it is by the crazy Yarnos, because they were killed by the executioners, as we learned in Whatnot. And so, yeah, a lot of people just like Canehurst because it is one of the more visually distinct areas. Not in terms of just like the actual layouts, but also because, you know, it has snow. The moon doesn't seem to affect things in Canehurst. You have to go to it through a ghost carriage, essentially. It's definitely got a lot of cool elements. And a lot of people really, really like Martyr Logarius. But as for me, I guess I would have liked Canehurst more if I liked the level design a bit more. But it just feels a little bit too donut-shaped and isn't as exciting to me as the first time going through Hemwick for some reason.
Hemwick Charnel Lane uses a similar template to several other areas in Bloodborne, a snaking, semi-linear pathway that utilizes 2 shortcuts. Its layout can be easily broken down into 2 circular paths that encompass 4 main sections: the lower village, the houses and their rooftops, the Hemwick crossing area, and the level's boss encounter. With only 1 lamp to be found right at the start of the region, Hemwick's shortcuts become crucial to the player experience, and the level's smaller scale makes it a clean illustration of how shortcuts are most frequently implemented in Bloodborne across the board.
Yeah, so I think part of it is how Hemwick kind of feels like it could make sense, even though like a lot of it doesn't with the way that you go on top of the rooftops and whatnot. But at least here you do have like a gate going into the Hemwick Charnel Lane proper, and like that little foreground section is like the outer town, whatever you want to call it. And that is all well and good, but as Fast and Carrot is pointing out, like when you go into Canehurst, it does not feel very natural, especially the way that you have to jump from one section of the castle to get to Martyr Logarius, which is supposed to be in like the main part of the castle where the throne room is. It just does not work for me.
Illustration of how shortcuts are most frequently implemented in Bloodborne across the board. The initial shortcut, that's this elevator right here, provides the player with access from the introductory area directly to the level's second section. You'll find a shortcut like this utilized in nearly every level in Bloodborne. It's a reward given to the player for successfully conquering the beginning sections of the level, as well.
Bro, I still think the design of Central Yarnum is probably like one of the best I've ever seen in a video game. I remember being like absolutely confused and lost when I rediscovered this lantern. I love Central Yarnum.
As doing their due diligence in exploring the surrounding space. Now, while Hemwick's elevator demonstrates this concept clearly, in practice it's less impactful than some of its counterparts in other levels. Because Hemwick Charnel Lane is like a condensed version of a Bloodborne level, the time and distance to this shortcut is relatively small, with only a few separate enemy encounters required before reaching it. So while it's nice to have, it doesn't provide the same utility that we see in more sprawling areas with similarly linear design, like the long ladder in Old Yarnum, or the elevator that gives you quick access to the right side of Canehurst Castle. Hemwick's second shortcut, this large...
Yeah, this is kind of a weird nitpick, and it's not really meant as a nitpick as much as it is like an observation and me wondering this out loud more for myself. But just having like all the statues in Canehurst where they feel really out of place in a way which surprises me, because there's even more statues throughout Central Yarnum and like the Cathedral Ward, but they don't seem to stick out as much as these ones do. Maybe it's because of like the style, the color, I don't know, but Canehurst just doesn't, it feels more gamey to me than like an actual setting like Hemwick Charnel Lane does, or even Central Yarnum to a degree.
To the right side of Canehurst Castle. Hemwick's second shortcut, this large gate found up the hill from the starting area, ends up being much more impactful. Bloodborne uses these main shortcuts to serve multiple purposes. One of those purposes is to create a clearer, more reasonable pathway back to the boss encounter. This is a quality of life choice that keeps the player's sanity intact by not forcing them to hold the run button for minutes at a time as they pass multiple groups of enemies on their way back to the fight. In Hemwick's case, the player simply needs to run through the lower village, past the gate, then take a quick turn to the left at Hemwick Crossing to reach the witches at the top of the hill. These shortcuts also serve as the final step in revealing a cohesively connected level. signifying the player's triumphs over its challenges. With both shortcuts available, what was once a very structured, linear path opens up to allow free exploration across the entire map. Often FromSoft games are discussed for their combat that involves notoriously difficult challenges that create a sensation of accomplishment when finally overcome. But what's not talked about as much is that that same principle applies to their level design. These developers have become very skilled at initially constraining the player in where they're able to go, forcing encounters.
It's kind of funny because I feel like maybe because of the focus of my channel, we often talk about the level design, but I think one of the biggest complaints about FromSoft games post Dark Souls is their lack of interconnectedness. And obviously Elden Ring is its own can of worms with the whole take on the open world genre, but a lot of people weren't as happy with the state of the level design because it wasn't as well as integrated into the hub area, whatever you want to call it, as it was in Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 2 was a little bit better, but I mean, Dark Souls 2 is regarded the way that it is for a reason, and a lot of people were unhappy with Dark Souls 3. I have mixed feelings about Dark Souls 3. I think it's the most streamlined of the games, for better or worse. And with that being said, I do wish it was more interconnected, but it's really hard for them to kind of make that, as you guys well know. And then Rachel Rogers, welcome into the stream.
With enemies in order to fully explore each nook and cranny of the map. But after all paths are discovered and all shortcuts unlocked, the player develops a sense of mastery over the level, as it inevitably becomes theirs to roam and explore as they see fit. That feeling is prompted the second we open the gate to Hemwick Crossing. I also mentioned pacing a minute ago, and this is one area in which the developers used Hemwick's smaller scope to their advantage. While larger regions like Central Yharnam or the Forbidden Woods provide more real estate to explore, Bloodborne's level designers make efficient use of Hemwick's condensed size by filling it with a...
That's probably one of the better ways that I've heard Hemwick described, that it's condensed and efficient with the space that it has. Because if you compare it to a place like the Forbidden Woods, which is absolutely gigantic and everyone gets lost in, everybody hates that place. But I know like a lot of people hate Hemwick, but it's a different kind of thing. I can respect Hemwick for what it is. It feels like there's a lot of tension around each and every corner because of like how much content is literally around each and every corner there. Fast and Carrot, you don't care that much about interconnectedness. It's cool and all, but putting it in just because DS1 did it isn't a great reason to do it. So it's a little bit comes down to what your personal preferences are in a game. It's nice when a game can be interconnected and does so in a meaningful way. So I think even with as quote-unquote interconnected as Dark Souls 1 is, it wouldn't be as interconnected as my ideal game, but that's because I would always want a more dynamically adapting world to the player's actions. So, for instance, a lot of people like the ability to get the master key for like the starting gift, and then they can head down to Blighttown immediately and do like a bunch of other stuff. So Dark Souls 1 offers a lot of seeming freedom at the very beginning of the game, depending on like what route you choose. Kind of like Dark Souls 2 in that regard, but I still say it's not really that open because you're really gated by not having access to the Lord Vessel, so you can't like go down and fight Nito early or anything like that.
Dense collection of distinct subsections. The player is smoothly guided from one landmark to another in a way that rewards progress with novelty, and the result is a level with no wasted space and no empty filler. There are many examples of how this is done effectively, too many in fact to include in this breakdown. So for now, here's a short summary. Hemwick's first subsection includes choices like unique enemy behavior and movement, as well as environmental foreshadowing before redirecting the player's path. The second section effectively disorients the player.
And another thing that's really good about Hemwick is that these witches, as you know, unique enemies, or these guys aren't witches. These ladies, as kind of unique enemies, are more frail than a lot of the common Yarnamites that you've seen so far. So you can stagger them just by rolling into them. And so it's just like a nice mesh of different aesthetics and different mechanics. And you don't really see women so much in this game up until this point in the game. So it's a little bit of a wake-up call for some people to see them. That's right, guys. Women exist. Get wrecked, gamers. Fasten says meaningful is an interesting word to use. You think sometimes you miss that part? I'm not sure who you're saying. You think sometimes to miss that part. DS1 has some meaningful interconnectedness, something like Lords of the Fallen does, because it wants to be like Dark Souls. So I really do like Lords of the Fallen. I think the level design for that game is pretty good, but I agree that I think Lords of the Fallen just tries to adhere too close to the Dark Souls formula in favor of being a Souls-like, rather than embracing the different things that it did well and kind of evolving the formula, which is kind of why I've been really enjoying Kazan, because it's very clearly inspired heavily by like the Dark Souls games in a way, or just Souls-likes in general, but it also seems to have enough of a unique identity that it hasn't become completely entrapped by those same failings of the FromSoft games. So I think the way that I'll describe Kazan to FromSoft players, it's like Sekiro 2, but maybe even arguably better than Sekiro, because one of my biggest criticisms about Sekiro is that it's a parry or get good game, whereas Kazan is a parry and get good game. So you don't always have to parry, but you can still like kill the bosses by actually dealing health damage to them. You don't have to worry about like stagger breaking everybody. So I've been enjoying myself. Lords of the Fallen 1 did as well, with nice interconnectivity. I have not played Lords of the Fallen 1. I always forget that that one exists, because nobody else seems to remember that game. You think people sometimes miss that part. Okay. And then Jason Saltry, welcome in. Sekiro 2, holy hell, sign you up. It's a really, really good game, honestly. So, yeah. It's got like 3 different ways to parry. It's pretty wild. It's pretty rough. But once you get the skill tree and start like being able to flesh things out, it's really dialing it in for me.
Before redirecting the player's path. The second section effectively disorients the player from their goal and breaks the pace of an otherwise largely outdoor level. The third continues Hemwick's structural variation by turning a once linear pathway into a now open environment with multiple approaches. And finally, the fourth houses the level's boss encounter, which seemingly receives a lukewarm reaction from fans, but certainly provides a fight that is quite unlike anything else you'll encounter in the game. Even with the excellence that is found throughout Bloodborne's level and world design, it's unusual to find single regions that contain such distinct sections, further cementing Hemwick Charnel Lane as one of Yharnam's most unmistakable levels. The soundness...
Oh yeah, so I probably should go back and walk back some of my Kazan claims, because to say that it's Sekiro 2 is a little bit of a misnomer. It's probably more of a middle ground between Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro 2, or Sekiro, the first one, because there's like no jump button and it's a little bit more static in that regard, but it's very smooth and streamlined and highly recommended by myself so far. I haven't completely beaten it yet. I'm getting towards the end game, so yeah.
Of Hemwick's layout and mechanical decisions, coupled with its unrivaled atmosphere and world building, make for one of the most memorable locations found in Bloodborne. But clearly a lot of people don't agree with that. So what might be the reasons for that? The fact that Hemwick is probably the cleanest example of the blueprint FromSoft uses for Bloodborne's optional areas tends to mean that it's also one of the most basic of them, at least from a structural perspective.
From what I understand, I don't know if this is true, but I've certainly heard that Hemwick Charnel Lane was the first area that they developed for the game. So it also makes sense that it's a very streamlined area that would go on to be pretty emblematic of the quote-unquote level design of Bloodborne.
Canehurst Castle follows the same 2 shortcut template, but
Kazan has the least criticism you've ever heard me give a game. Honestly, it's really polished. trying to think if there's anything like really egregious about it. So honestly, the biggest parts of Kazan that I dislike tend to be things that I think could have been fixed with some quality of life stuff and just streamlined to be a little bit faster for things. But it doesn't really have a lot of the failings of the FromSoft games in terms of like the item economy so far. There is a little bit of grinding, but it's always elective grinding if you want to do it for like extra item sets and whatnot.
Does it in a somewhat interesting way that has the player essentially tracing the outline of the level while looking out onto a snowy environment not found anywhere else in the game. Old Yharnam is quite a bit larger and more complex than Hemwick, contains some of the best environmental storytelling in the game, and utilizes a unique obstacle in the hunter who constantly shoots at you with his Gatling gun. Non-optional areas, meanwhile, provide a far less linear experience, something that many players hold near the top of their priorities when it comes to FromSoft level design. So it's not unreasonable to assume that these mainline levels would rank higher for that reason alone. I would also wager that a large portion of people, when assessing this level, place a greater weight on one aspect of it than the rest: the Witches of Hemwick. For better or worse, the Witches of Hemwick are what many people most immediately associate with Hemwick Charnel Lane. Understandably, they share the same name.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for one aspect of a level to tear away a bit at the rest of the work done in the content surrounding it, even if
Yeah, Meow Laser says it that the cell shading is a choice, but you've been enjoying Kazan. Honestly, like that might be like my biggest it's not even like a complaint, but maybe like disappointment about the game, is that the art does feel a little bit old for a kind of like brand new game. And there's still like some performance issues because, you know, it's freaking Unreal. Literally the engine. It sounds like Kazan might have the parry system your central nervous system has been craving. I would definitely recommend checking out the demo at the very least if you're very curious about it. Because the demo just kind of gives like a taste of what you'll get once you get to the full game. So the demo does start off pretty slow, and at first when I was playing it, I was kind of disappointed because like, man, this is basic as crap. But that's because they don't give you the actual skill tree until you fully complete the first mission. But then once you get it, it definitely opens up.
the rest of that work is really impressive. This fight is quite unusual and does not follow the formula for bosses that FromSoft has made a living off of. That is, extremely durable enemies with deliberately aggressive movesets made to overwhelm the player. And while personally I kind of find some value in introducing an intentionally bizarre boss fight, I do understand the arguments against it. The witches simply don't pose much of a threat. In fact, they barely fight back themselves other than the occasional dodgeable spell. They're slow and weak and rely on spawning other creatures to fight for them. It's a fight that often involves the player having to chase after their target rather than a boss that aggressively engages on their own. It's not crazy for players to expect a challenging, exciting, more traditional boss battle based around the witch theme that surrounds Hemwick. So in a way, the Witches of Hemwick as they are have become a bit of a victim of their developers' own skill set and their fans' expectations. But FromSoft decided to go in a different direction, and if you're a player who just really dislikes this boss encounter for these or other reasons, it's likely you're not thinking too highly of Hemwick Charnel Lane as a whole. And lastly, there's a third psychological piece that took me a while to realize may be playing a role in players' impressions of this level. It's kind of scary. Bloodborne is not a horror game by design, but it certainly toes that line in more ways than FromSoft's other work. Its environments, enemy design, and narrative all contain at least some themes of horror, and these...
Yeah, I'm not sure how you guys feel about the quote-unquote horror aspect of Bloodborne in general, but for me there is a little bit more of an unsettling feeling going through Hemwick Charnel Lane than many of the other areas in the game. I think, as I was saying before, like there's a lot of tension baked into going through like the different areas. As you first go through the graveyard, you have to deal with all the snipers, picking you off from a distance, as well as being wary of the dogs, which can close the distance extremely quickly, which is very stressful. And then as soon as you're done with that level of stress, you go into the village. Then you have the women being loud and kind of unnatural, off-putting with their movements. Then you also have to worry about getting pushed off of the level in certain areas, being or having Molotov cocktails thrown at you. So I think it's a very stressful area, which is why a lot of people don't like it. So even though I definitely think it's a stressful area and I don't particularly enjoy like going through it moment to moment, I really do like Hemwick Charnel Lane because it does kind of offer that variety and experiences that I enjoy in games. But also keep in mind that I'm the type of person that does not mind the poison swamps in FromSoft games, and I do unironically like the Grave of Untended Giants. Untended Giants? Giants Grave? Whatever it's called in Dark Souls 1, which is part of why it's one of my AFK screens. Yahar'gul's abject horror. I don't know. Like, I feel like Yahar'gul is heavily carried by Hail to the Nightmare, the diegetic sound in the background. But once you get past that, it's not super crazy until you get sent back there with the Blood Moon. So maybe Yahar'gul versus Hypogean Jail might be the distinction. So you might be saying Yahar'gul as in like post Blood Moon, whereas I lump it in with the Hypogean Jail, which may not be fair. The sheer terror is found by fighting those screamers that run at you? Yeah. No, you don't think Hemwick's scary at all? With that horn said, the first time you go through Hemwick, Central Yharnam, and a lot of the Nightmare of Mensis, it feels like a horror game. Everything else feels horror-themed. Yeah, obviously, once you start going into Byrgenwerth, it tends to become like more cosmic horror. And a lot of people don't like the turn of events going through the Forbidden Woods towards Byrgenwerth and Ram. They wanted a more like gothic Victorian game, and then they got H.P. Lovecraftian Victorian game.
These themes are confronted very openly in Hemwick Charnel Lane. The feelings of isolation and being removed from the rest of society, the paranormal witch activity present.
Also, just the sound design of Bloodborne, I think, is the best so far in the Souls games, or, you know, the FromSoft games. Maybe you could say, like, Armored Core is better. I'd need to really think about that one more and reaccustomize myself to Armored Core 6, but I haven't played the other Armored Cores to really be able to weigh in on that. And I think, like, the sound design in Hemwick Charnel Lane is fantastic. You've got like the torches, the flames and stuff, like the people talking in intermittently saying random stuff. The damn crows being the loudest thing in existence, scaring the crap out of you. It's a fun place.
Throughout, the constant signs that this entire town is basically one massive grave. Hemwick is undoubtedly one of the creepier locations in all of Yharnam. It is not home to any friendly NPCs, and the only sign of life outside the enemies you encounter is a voice behind this one door that doesn't exactly put the player at ease with their dialogue.
I just can't wait.
So I think it's possible that Hemwick just kind of creeps people out. And I also think it's valid to dislike a part of a game if it elicits an undesirable emotion for you personally, even if you can recognize and respect that it may be well made. So yeah, there certainly are reasons why many players would rank Hemwick Charnel Lane lower in their list of Bloodborne levels.
I think the greatest sin of Hemwick Charnel Lane is that it's unsettling. It's not like abjectly horrifying or completely mundane. It just, there's always something completely off about it that can just probably rankle people the wrong way. Like, it just, yeah, you just feel it. I don't know how to articulate it better than that.
But that's part of what makes level design so interesting. It's both an art and a science that leaves plenty of room for player preference and interpretation, and Bloodborne in particular is full of levels that have the potential to facilitate these discussions. And that's where I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Hemwick compared to other locations in Bloodborne? Which levels do you think rank clearly higher on your list? Which levels do you despise having to play through, and for what reasons? I'd love to hear about your answers in the comments below. For now, my arguments are clear. Hemwick's level design establishes an environment that feels extremely unique while also folding in perfectly to the overall mood and narrative of Bloodborne. Its mysterious atmosphere, made possible by several artistic details, is among the best at creating real feelings of intrigue in a game that is constantly presenting the player with interesting questions. And its densely packed, diverse layout and routing make for one of the cleanest examples of FromSoft's level design in the entire game. And don't forget, it's also creepy as fuck.
You find Dominion more unsettling? See, I can't feel that way at all, because if you're in an open world area, you could just use torrent, and so that just kind of kills almost all the tension for me in most places in the games, which is why, like, the Abyssal Woods, to me, is probably one of the most tense areas in the game that's not in a legacy dungeon, unless you want to say that the entirety of the Abyssal Woods and Midge's Manse is one gigantic legacy dungeon, and then maybe...
Videos on the design of specific levels are some of my favorite pieces of content to create, and Bloodborne is a game that largely excels at this aspect of game design. So if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and like it, subscribe if you're really into this stuff, and let me know if there are other levels in Bloodborne or otherwise that you'd like to see me break down in detail in a future video. See you next time.
So yeah, on that topic, I do think it's like an okay video. I wish he went into more detail about like what he specifically finds about the level design to be good, as to like what specific choices, other than just saying like it's condensed, even though I do think those are some pretty good descriptors of things here. So I'm going to go ahead and share it with you guys in the chat if you want to give Leap Gaming some support, as always. And Mao, you think Hemwick is just ordinary, so you don't feel anything about that? Bro, what kind of villages do you have in Brazil? Without Hornset, until someone actually pointed out that the Canehurst Vile Bloods were vampire coded, it didn't register to you, and you were just like, so why are they called Vile Bloods? Don't worry, I mean, sometimes that's just how it is. Chadwick said, y'all ain't never been to Flint, you take it, nor Detroit? Nope, I certainly have been to Detroit. I even went to the, what do you call it, chili tasting competition, and was shocked to discover that my favorite chili at the chili tasting competition was a turkey-based chili, a white chili. So get wrecked, Chadwick. I got family there. So anyway, moving on from the chili tasting competition, let's go ahead and check out Miriel's Secret Lore Solves Oldest Mysteries, Elden Ring Lore by Elden Dork, because the K is capitalized. I might need to turn down the volume on this one. Hey, Mercy, nice to see you.
I welcome you to the Church of Vows. I will share...
His gain is like too high or something for Miriel. That's wild.
all that I know.
For example, from here you can see both the Erd Tree and the Academy of Rhea.
Miriel's voice almost reminded me of frickin' Vamos from Dark Souls 1.
Okay, but did you know about that one statue in the capital and how red-haired Radagon is this statue behind me, then? Perhaps you want to know what is up with that?
I believe that one was in Dark Souls 3. I know it's come up on the Discord multiple times. I just can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Whoops.
Then I would like to share my knowledge with you.
Crunchy
Like
hates
much of the
Miriel's
land
voice.
between, the Church of Vows is a place of evolving identity and forgotten history. It shares the same architecture and symbolism as both the Cathedral of Manus Celis and Manus Meter. All three structures are adorned with statues depicting this hooded man who is most likely Radagon, the champion who...
I hate it. I know Teen Sith's a big proponent of this, and I know Kite Tails is, but I absolutely cannot stand that would be Radagon.
married the Full Moon Queen, and whose vows the church is now named after. And considering there's a two fingers buried beneath Manus Celis, and the mother of fingers beneath Manus Meter, it makes me wonder, what's buried beneath the feet of Miriel, pastor of exposition?
Well, why don't you why don't you just use the underground maps as a reference? So part of the reason why I dislike the idea that it would be a Radagon in the as depicted as like the statue guy in the Church of Vows or on the Divine Towers is because you also get it in the Eternal Cities before the elevator that leads down to Blythe and Ronnie in the Lake of Rot. And to me, it just seems like those statues should predate Radagon's rise to prominence by a significant margin. Peter, father of fingers. Petter.
Oh.
Metter.
As Miriel points out, the Academy and the Erd Tree can both be seen from the Church of Vows, fitting for the location where the great houses of the Erd Tree and Moon were joined. The church is perfectly aligned to view the Academy through its ornate windows. However, the Erd Tree is only visible from within the church due to its current state of disrepair. This church was not originally constructed for viewing the Erd Tree. Rather, it was built perfectly aligned with the moon.
But the Erd Tree is also tilted. Maybe it wasn't always tilted.
Not just the Church of Vows. To the southwest, the Cathedral of Manicelis is also aligned with the Academy and a moon, but not the same moon. Rather, the hidden one that's only visible from here in the Moonlight Altar. Perhaps the Cathedral of Manus Meter was also once aligned with the Academy and its own moon, the now lost Black Moon of Noxtella.
So this is one of those things where I'd want to double check for myself by orienting my camera out of the, not Church of Vows, the Manus Celeste. But it does really suck that we're told that the landscape did kind of change with the shattering. And it's always been something that I would have liked to have done, but it just seems kind of something that you couldn't prove one way or the other if you were right or not, would be to go back and try to unjigsaw the lands between and undo the effects of the shattering on the topography of the area, because one of the easiest ones for me to point to is how like the fortified manor's bridge should lead to a divine tower, but it connects to nothing. So presumably there should have been another divine tower like right next to the fortified manor, or at least the bridge. But you have a waygate that goes to the isolated tower. But I've also wondered whether or not they just put that there for convenience, and whether or not the Rykard divine tower that's to the west, the southwest of Fortified Manor, was the one that was connected literally to the Fortified Manor in the past. The one that you have to go through like the little mines to get to.
So why were two, and likely all three of these lunar cathedrals built to be aligned with the Academy of Rhea Lucaria?
So he's saying the moon is down here or up there? I appreciate the lines there. I'm not so sure about the Manus Meter connection, or Manus Celeste connection right now.
The Academy existed before it became the seat of the full moon queen, Ranala. In fact, symbols depicting the stars and the sun are found throughout the Academy. Even the sigil of the Academy depicts the sun at its base, a starry night sky a layer above it, and at the top, the full moon ornamented with the Carian sigil. I contend that the Academy sigil depicts its history, the most recent era of the full moon at the top, preceded by the study of the stars in the primeval current, and its origins rooted in the study of the sun.
Does that mean that we have the black moon there at the bottom?
Just as Miriel says, the great houses of the Erd Tree and the moon were once joined at the Church of Vows, but before then, when the church was first built, it was to join the House of the Moon and the Academy of the Sun.
I highly doubt that the Rhea Lucarian institution was the Academy of the Sun, because we're told that Lusat and Azur founded the oldest conspectuses. I always forget who's actually the older of the two. And the very first one, that conspectus, Olivinus was the one that studied comets, and those seem to be quite distinct from the sun. And I digress. Without Horns asks, isn't there also evidence that Liurnia used to be at a different elevation? So yeah, because Liurnia is now covered by the lakes, some people have argued that it probably got depressed, just as depressed as Renala did once Radagon left. So the fact that the Academy Gate Town is completely submerged suggests that things are quite different now than how they used to be. And then Without Horns is thinking at the top of the thing was the Primal Current. Or Primeval Current. I think that's probably the case as well. I don't know. Or no, don't we have it? Anyway, I'm sure the sigil will come up again and I'll talk about it.
The church has more secrets to uncover, but the one I'm most excited to share is the origins, the meaning, and the implications of this statue tucked away behind Miriel. The implications of its placement here are profound, yet it's not found anywhere else in the lands between or the land of shadow. There is no other instance of this statue existing in Elden Ring. So where then will we learn more about it?
Carriers of the accursed.
Okay. I was about to look in the Discord to see where we talked about this. So he's referencing Dark Souls.
Dark sign.
In Dark Souls. In Dark Souls, just above the surface of the floodwaters that drowned an entire city, is a statue of a hooded woman embracing a child. It sits atop the roof of a temple that houses the Abyss, that which the entire city was flooded to contain. To make sense of the statue behind Miriel, we must first be familiar with the Dark Souls character depicted in this statue. Dark Souls lore veterans may already know who this is, and for those unfamiliar, I'm excited to introduce you to Velka, a goddess known by many names who is considered to have a great range of influence, even as gods are concerned.
I have to admit that I did not expect to get Velka in the video about Miriel.
There is substantial evidence indicating this statue depicts Velka, and it deserves a dedicated Dark Souls lore video. This video, however, is about the Church of Vows, and I'm engaging maximum willpower to avoid getting too far off topic. Some of this evidence is found in the flooded ruins of New Londo, but the bulk of it is found sealed away within the painted world of Ariamis. Here we find the same statue of Velka, but in better condition, along with a stockpile of items directly referencing her. And we find the same statue yet again in Dark Souls 3, although this time it's been vandalized and beheaded, and it's found within a similar yet different painted world of Ariandel. Velka's statue functions identically in both games. Beneath both versions is a mechanism that when activated starts a cutscene where the statue rotates, unlocking the path to the zone's boss. I mentioned before that Velka is known by many names, and it's relevant now, so I'll elaborate. In Dark Souls, she is the goddess of sin, a black-haired witch, and a rogue deity. By the time of the events of Dark Souls 3, she is also known as the Mother of the Forlorn, and Keitha, Goddess of Tears. We can be confident that Velka and Keitha are the same goddess because of the enormous overlap they share in terms of gameplay mechanics and in-world presence. Their statues are similar, their items do the same things, and their followers come from the same place. And in Dark Souls 2, where Keitha's name first appears, the name-engraved ring states, "Perhaps they are the very same gods as ours, only known by different names." Velka's statue has been beheaded in Dark Souls 3 because this woman, Sister Frida, is impersonating the Mother of the Forlorn, the mistress of the painted world whom the forlorn Corvians pray to. In a nearby library guarded by Sister Frida's dedicated knight Wilhelm is another statue of a robed woman, different from the Velka statue we're familiar with, but vandalized the same way. There are 16 of these statues found here, all beheaded, none intact, indicating that they were vandalized for the same reason as the Velka statue, because they depict the same woman. This Mother of the Forlorn statue can be found intact elsewhere in Dark Souls 3. Outside the Painted World, within Lothric Castle, is a building I refer to as the Church of Caitha. So called because found here are items referencing Caitha, as well as the summon sign of an NPC with explicit ties to Caitha. And it's here, inside this church, that we find one of the most obscure secrets of Elden Ring.
I knew it was somewhere in Dark Souls 3, like the higher resolution version. I just couldn't remember off the top of my head. So I'm glad at least he gets to show us where this was.
The statue behind Miriel is an Easter egg left by the developers that depicts a goddess of great influence whose identity continuously evolved over the course of the Dark Souls series. Does this mean that Elden Ring and Dark Souls exist in a shared universe? No. I seriously doubt it.
Well, I was afraid because as soon as anybody starts doing the Velkification of lore, it really isn't too much of a hop, skip, and a jump away into making the shared universe connection. But you know, the Miriel Knights were in Elden Ring's update, so yeah, who knows? Maybe they're all connected, and we have Night Rain to blame.
I believe it's meant to be a meta-contextual clue, and the implications that the devs chose to place it here, in the Church of Vows, are huge.
Concerning the miracle of this Church of Vows, Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Rennala. This miracle blesses the Church to this day, and so you need only follow Radagon's example. The miracle rooted in these grounds will once again mend the world.
Considering the only items found within the Church of Vows were formerly Radagon's, the abundance of Radagon statues here, and that Miriel's dialogue focuses on the actions of Radagon, the Church of Vows is unambiguously a monument to Radagon.
So, if we are to accept that, we would need to say that these were placed after the church's construction, which they very well could be, and it's probably very likely, to be fair there. But if he is of the opinion that they were all made at the same time, it wouldn't track very well that you'd have the Radagon iconography with the moon and stuff. And setting all that stuff aside, I'm still not on board that this guy depicts Radagon at all, to be honest. And hey, Hilko, welcome back in.
The implication of the placement of Caitha's statue here is that Radagon is a new iteration of Velka. Even the pedestal that Radagon's statues stand on is identical to Caitha's in Dark Souls 3. Not convinced? The statues didn't do it for you? No problem. Allow me to elaborate further.
Because, I mean, those pedestals appear elsewhere in Ariandel as well.
You are unable to enter the Erd Tree, no? Prevented by the mantle of barbs. The thorns are impenetrable, a husk of the Erd Tree's being that spurns all that exists without.
We can be confident that Radagon is responsible for this mantle of impenetrable thorns because Radagon's Elden Rune can clearly be seen reinforcing it. The sorcery's Briars of Sin and Briars of Punishment both wound the caster with thorns of sin and punishment. And it is the task of Goddess Velka to define the sin and mete out the punishment. This is stated in the item description of a miracle found in Dark Souls called Karmic Justice. Miracles are what incantations are called in Dark Souls, and there are two miracles that are explicitly Velka's: Karmic Justice and Vow of Silence. In Elden Ring, we know from the incantation Radagon's Rings of Light that Radagon was a Golden Order fundamentalist. And Golden Order fundamentalism has two key fundamentals, each of which are represented by its own incantation: the law of regression and the law of causality. The effects of casting the Law of Causality are identical to casting Karmic Justice in Dark Souls. It's
Hey, Phantom Leaves, nice to see you again.
the same spell reskinned for Elden Ring. And it's nearly the same case for the Law of Regression. Its effects are extremely similar to Vow of Silence in Dark Souls. The Law of Regression dispels magical effects within its area of effect, while Vow of Silence prevents all spellcasting within its area of effect. The two laws of Radagon's Golden Order fundamentalism do the same thing as Velka's two miracles. And those aren't the only game mechanics Radagon and Velka share. They're both directly associated with the Absolution mechanic, which resets NPC aggro. It goes by the same name in Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Elden Ring, and functions identically in each. In Elden Ring, Absolution is performed in front of a Nox Priestess statue while surrounded by statues of Radagon.
And so
It's weird to me that he's going so heavily in this direction when he was claiming that the games weren't related. So even if these are thematic ones, I don't know how fair that is to say that the Absolution is Radagon aligned, when we're told that from Miriel that Radagon needed to have Celestial Dew, and we have a Nox Maiden performing the Absolution for us rather than a so-called depiction of Radagon. Radagon is Velka confirmed? Thanks, I hate it.
So you need only follow Radagon's example, and absolution will be yours.
In Dark Souls 3, Absolution is performed at a statue of Velka. And in Dark Souls 1 and 2, it's performed by Pardoners of Velka.
Oh god, Oswald of Kareem stance. That's exactly like America's stance in the Realm of Shadow statues. Oswald is America confirmed? No, it just means that Velka is America, and therefore America is Radagon, is Velka is confirmed.
PCs with explicit ties to the goddess of sin. Remember that one of Velka's aliases in Dark Souls 3 is Mother of the Forlorn? Well, in Elden Ring, there's a Cave of the Forlorn, in which we find Radagon's Golden Order greatsword, bequeathed to him by Renala when they married, and reforged by Radagon to resemble the Elden Ring. And we find it being wielded by a Leonine Misbegotten. The Misbegotten are almost the only inhabitants of the Cave of the Forlorn, and it's no coincidence that they share a strong resemblance to the Forlorn Corvians of Dark Souls 3. Both are often found praying until disturbed. The Corvians pray to the Mother of the Forlorn, and we find Misbegotten praying to Radagon. Velka's and Radagon's servants share astonishing similarities as well. The Mask of Confidence.
So as you guys heard my computer dinging, I was looking into the Forlorn connection. It's not, well, hold on. Maybe it's more of a Dark Souls 2 connection. Would this be a spell? Let me double check the Forlorn from Dark Souls 2. Oh, right. So in Dark Souls 2, we have Soshitsumono, which, means the Forlorn, which kind of means like Revenant. Whereas in Elden Ring, the Cave of the Forlorn is... Hold on, let's make this bigger. It uses a different set of kanji. So they're different. And then, what was the other case of the Forlorn in... Was it this? No. Nope. Storyteller's Staff uses the Forlorn Souls. Those are a different type of Forlorn. But anyway, like the other type of Forlorn are Imimono, which is almost like Omen. So long story short, I don't think they're supposed to be synonymous in any regard. So that just kind of seems to be more of an English thing, which I mean, if you want to go with that, that's totally fine. That's up to the individual, but for those who wanted to see if there's more or less corroboration for that idea, just wanted to share that. Although I have to say, this is a pretty cool transition using the actual icon of the thing on Celovus himself. That's pretty dope. It's so weird that the Misbegotten has it. I know, it's just in a cave off in nowhere. He married Renala, then decided to skip on up to the Forge of the Giants. The furtive pygmy is the Gek. The furtive pygmy is Velka, so easily forgotten. You're enjoying the arrangement of the main theme as well? Okay, so I was noticing it also, and I was like, man, this is pretty good. It's unfortunate we don't have anything quite that nice in the game. I mean, we do, but that one's a little bit more somber, and I enjoy it. Especially for, like, the purposes of a lore video.
States, when Radagon married Renala, he ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don these masks. The mouths of these masks had been sealed shut by Radagon's Elden Rune. Radagon's Elden Rune is not the only symbol of interest on this mask. Around the neck we find a clasp of intertwining serpents, an out-of-place symbol to be worn by a servant of Radagon in an age where serpents were considered traitors of the Erd Tree. At this point in the video, it may not be such a surprise to learn that Velka's pardoner wears a remarkably similar clasp around his neck. But when I first noticed, it blew my mind. And Velka's mask has a symbol on the forehead. I believe this symbol represents the eclipsed sun, its light flowing downward. Isn't it nuts that the mask of Radagon's precept
I'm sorry, but just switching from, like, a diamond to a full-on circle is just... And saying that they're same is just kind of...
has a symbol of the sun
amazing.
on its forehead as well? An eclipsed sun? So what, right? Why am I so excited if Radagon is Velka? What are the implications that I consider to be so profound? Because Velka is a big deal in Dark Souls lore, yet there is very little declarative information about her. We know that she was a goddess, a black-haired witch, and she had a penchant for wearing hoods. But what exactly she did or did not do, or what her motivations were, are not made explicit. There is an abundance of mystery surrounding Velka. Not unlike Radagon. We know of some of the big deal things he's done, such as father demigods and attempt to repair the Elden Ring, but his motivations remain as mysterious as his origins. I think it's fair to assume that these two characters' actions and motivations overlap as much as their themes and depictions do. If Radagon mastered both sorceries and incantations, then Velka mastered both sorceries and miracles. If Velka is the mother of the forlorn, then Radagon is the father of the misbegotten. If Radagon attempted to repair the Elden Ring, then Velka attempted to contain the Abyss to preserve the Age of Fire. If Velka...
That's a huge jump. Because we're not told whether or not Velka had any involvement in this, and you could make the argument that the gods did that despite Velka, and they were just too worried about the dark to care about her retributive powers.
Velka flooded a city to contain the...
Although I guess if you want to make the argument that Gwendolyn is on Velka's side, you could probably make an argument, but my point is it's kind of arguable at best.
Power of Life Drain. Then Radagon flooded a city to contain the power of Life Drain.
What? Let me back that up.
Contain the power of Life Drain. Then Radagon flooded a city to contain the power of Life Drain.
Because of Lifesteal Fists? Because you get that there? That's kind of... That's a terrible argument, quite frankly.
If a daughter of Radagon was a lunar princess of a moon-worshipping land of golden sorceries, and whose mother was a powerful sorcerer, then Princess Dusk of Ulasil, a land of moon worship and golden sorceries, was the daughter of Velka and a powerful sorcerer.
Oh boy. These are non sequiturs. These ifs do not follow.
If the followers of Velka once attempted to steal the power of death in an ill-fated plot to destroy the gods, then it was Radagon's followers who executed the Knight of the Black Knives. If Velka sealed a world within a painting, trapping inside her daughter who possessed a power the gods feared, then it was Radagon who veiled the lands of shadow, trapping within his son who possessed a power the gods feared. If Radagon was once king consort of the lands between, then Velka was once queen consort of Lordran. And this is all just scratching the surface, because let's not forget that while Velka is Radagon, Radagon is America. I know I've made some bold claims about both Elden Ring and Dark Souls lore, and I'm excited to share the evidence in future videos. These claims can stand on their own within their own game. My notes are filled with evidence found in Elden Ring for Elden Ring, and the same for Dark Souls. But it's just so cool that we get to experience Miyazaki's characters again in Elden Ring. They've never been just flat plot devices.
Oh, so he does mean this literally after all. I was wondering if he was still talking in metaphor, because he did say that the games weren't connected earlier, but now it seems like he's ignoring that clarification and just going on with it regardless.
They've always been complex, flawed, and evolving characters. Their histories are filled with triumphs, regrets, and turning points. And in Elden Ring, bolstered by George R.R. Martin's writing, these human characters have been rendered with more detail and complexity than we've had the chance to see before. And there's still much left to discover, unsolved mysteries that I'm determined we can solve. So
yeah, I already know what this is. This is the Virgin of Paris. It shows up in Bloodborne. Bloodborne is part of Elden Ring. Sony get wrecked, IP infringement, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Stay tuned as we set out to reveal
There's also Charlemagne elsewhere.
one such mystery. I hope you'll join in
Hey,
the
there he
search
is, our
for
boy.
Elden Ring's missing Lord of Sunlight.
Oh, please don't say Charlemagne's Lord of the Sun.
For a convincing breakdown of why the hooded man statues found at the lunar cathedrals depict Radagon, I highly recommend
of course.
these two videos by Jack as a Mimic and Kite Tales. Huge thanks to Alex Rowe for generously giving permission to play his game music remixes in videos like this one. Be sure to check out his channel. And thanks for watching my video.
Did he already mention Night Rain? He actually did not. When did that video come out?
I welcome.
That video came out 4 months ago, so the DLC was already out. Oh yeah, he referenced the DLC stuff a little bit. I do not like that video. It made a lot of terrible assumptions and terrible arguments with if-then statements that were just non sequiturs. But nonetheless, I'm still going to share the video with you guys because you may have enjoyed it more than I did, and you can kind of counteract me not liking it if you so choose. Go check out Alex Rowe. Oh yeah, Phantom Leaves. If you want me to react to one of your videos, make sure you leave a comment or something, because I forget quite often what's been recommended to me in the past. I don't remember if you had asked me and I forgot, but sometimes stuff like that happens. So, okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and check out some more psychic damage, because I think Elden Enthusiast in the chat wanted to inflict this on myself and others with Ask Mojo's or Mojo Plays 10 Elden Ring theories that might actually be true. And this came out 2 months ago, so post DLC. Carrot, you were with him on a number of the parallels, but others were reaching, and then he just skips to the end and asks you to watch more stuff, and he lost you. I mean, to be fair, I don't really blame content creators for doing that kind of thing. I try to produce as much self-contained content as I can, just because I am a binge watcher. I kind of hate being teased and needing to wait weeks on end to watch things, which reminds me I still need to watch this week's Wheel of Time. Anyway, not relevant. So he made his arguments. I don't think his supporting evidence for it was as ironclad as he would have liked, but I mean, that's just one of those things where we can disagree about the interpretation of certain things like statues and how that might inform one's interpretation of the lore in general. So even though I didn't really like the video, I still appreciated the fact that he showed that those statues were in Dark Souls, because it's just kind of nice to know where some of these assets come from time to time. Mercy, do I have any more videos from that one dude, Last Protagonist? Me? Oh, because we watched one of his videos the other night on stream. Unfortunately, I do not. You think I'll enjoy his stuff? I don't know. He seems kind of pompous to me. Anyway, let's check out 10 Elden Ring theories that might actually be true.
Oh, I know. Can you take this little one along with you?
Welcome to Mojo Plays, and today we're having some fun and speculating wildly. True or not, there's no denying that these are very fun to talk about. These are 10 Elden Ring theories that might be true. There have already been arguments for and against a lot of these, so whether or not you believe it, let a little whimsy into your heart and join me for this journey, or jump in a lake of rot. Before we continue, we publish content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of our latest videos. Naming Torrent. There is no tool in Elden Ring that is more appreciated than your trusty horse slash goat slash angel slash best friend mount Torrent. I think it's possible I use Torrent more than I use my Flask of Crimson Tears. The controls and movement of Torrent are highly responsive and smooth, and there was clearly a lot of time put into making Torrent as useful as possible, but turns out he's not.
It's kind of funny because I definitely know a lot of people who hate that you need to have some forward momentum when turning torrents, unless you pull out your binoculars. Pro tip right there. Anyway, I digress. And of course,
Name might have been more practical than creative. While the mount's name has a cool ring to it, some fans speculate that the developers named the horse Torrent as a clever tactic to deter piracy via torrent sharing sites. The idea is both simple and ingenious. Searching Elden Ring Torrent is more likely to lead to information about the horse rather than illegal copies of the game, which, if true, is one of the most clever things I've seen in a video game in 30 years.
I'm gonna refresh it again. It's right at 128. So yeah, as far as Torrent being named Torrent to stop torrenting, it's kind of a fun little tongue twister almost. I would say that very well could be a quote-unquote true theory for all we know. Nobody trying to pirate would Google that. I mean, Elden Ring was wildly popular, and most pirates, maybe, let's just say there's a significant chunk of would-be pirates who aren't necessarily seasoned sailors, if you get my drift. Have you ever tried Skyrim's or The Witcher's horse? What about Shadow of the Colossus horse? I've tried Skyrim. It's been so long that I don't remember what that was like. And I've not played The Witcher. So I bought The Witcher 3 on like a super sale a couple years back. And then I was like, okay, I've heard really good things about this. I should play this game eventually. And it's super cheap right now, so I'll go ahead and buy it. And then I read the books. And then I'm like, you know what? I kind of don't really care about this anymore. So I'm probably not going to play The Witcher, unfortunately. And then Shadow of the Colossus is the best horse. Shadow of the Colossus is on my Terminal 2 playlist.
As I've seen in a video game in 30 years.
What is up, YouTube?
Melena's origin.
Don't worry, Torrent. Fortune is on his side.
This is one of those fan theories that has been built upon some truly solid info, with some players thinking, duh, it's obvious. While it seems obvious when all of the information is gathered, there is never anything 100% solid to label Melena's origin, leading players to speculate from contextual information that she is Messmer's sister. We know for sure that they're both children of Marika's, but in Elden Ring, that can mean more than the simple version of siblings that we understand. The idea that they are siblings stems from the potential thematic connections, with Melena's ties to the Erdtree and Guidance of the Tarnished paralleling Messmer's speculated role as an enforcer of order through force. Fans point to possible parallels in their names and symbolic duality. Malenia represents sacrifice and renewal, while the Impaler implies punishment and finality. They contrast so much that it seems intentional, or unrelated, but that's no fun.
I broke your heart, Mercy. I'm sorry. So, okay, guys, I'll go into a little bit of a Witcher spoiler for you, and then explain like why I kind of fell into complete disinterest in the series. So strap in for like the next minute or so, starting now. Yeah, I really liked The Witcher book 1-ish, like the short story collection. The second book was all right. I don't remember how many I read, but I got to the point where Ciri and like Geralt finally get to the Emperor. They try to like stop the war, and the Emperor's like, I'm not going to stop at anything until I get my daughter. And then Ciri's like, hey, please stop conducting this war. And he's like, you know how I said I'm not going to stop at anything? I guess I'll stop now after a night of sleep. It's like, and this dude is like conducting one of the most bloodiest, brutal, genocidal wars ever conceived. And he just stops essentially on a whim, despite having like a fated reason in his mind to do what he's doing. And it's just, that kind of killed my enthusiasm for the series. So, okay, that was that.
I offer you an accord.
But no Honda.
Endgame gravity.
Bro, why? Why am I having to like refresh the page every single time? I'm going to do it once more. 241. It's like I changed the setting on YouTube once, and then it works fine for a portion of a video. Then I have to change it again. This is wild. So yeah, Malenia being related to Mesmer is more or less confirmed if you can have the barest amount of media literacy to read between the lines of the mention of like the little sister most likely being Malenia as the bearer of the vision of fire and whatnot.
I offer you an accord.
Endgame gravity. First of all, to understand this theory, you have to accept a totally separate theory. Don't question it, just accept this for the fun of speculation. Elden Ring is a prequel to the Souls games. Got it?
Thanks, I hate it. Even if it becomes canon, I'm still going to hate it.
Fact? Good. A fan theory on Reddit, building on this previous theory, humorously suggests that Elden Ring's endgame strengthens gravity, making jumping nearly impossible without special preparation like in the Souls games. While this theory is mostly lighthearted, it has one intriguing piece of evidence: the noticeable lack and/or difficulty in jumping in the earlier Souls titles. If these games are connected to Elden Ring, this could imply a significant change occurred to the world's physics. Though speculative, it's just a bit of bloody fun, which doesn't mean it's false.
Counterpoint, you could flip around with Artorias' sword. Part of the chapters called Malenia. So it seems like they're using AI to auto-transcribe their text. It's really weird because this is not the Google form of AI voice-to-text transcription, because that'll do like full-on blocks of text, not like one word at a time. And there was just kind of like no editorial double checking for accuracy here. So sometimes that's just the nature of dealing with closed captions, but not everybody in the stream speaks English as a first language, and it could be helpful for them to have the subtitles even when they aren't the most perfect.
Maiden Killer.
And then Halo of the Sun, welcome back in. Yeah, I know Witcher 3 has pretty much nothing to do with the books, but my enthusiasm died nonetheless. The way he pronounced it was funky anyway. He sounds Australian or something like that, so I think it's just more of an accent thing.
At the start of the game, in the Chapel of Anticipation, we encounter the lifeless body of a maiden. Some players theorize that she was meant to be our character's maiden. Shortly after emerging in Limgrave, we meet White Mask Vare, who comments on our maidenless state and directs us towards Stormvale Castle. Vare, a manipulative and...
Vare. It took me a second. I'm like, who is he talking about, Vare? So it almost sounds like he hasn't played the game then. I mean, that's not fair because, I mean, many people don't even really pay attention to Vare. I've definitely seen people kill him on sight once they've left the stranded graveyard and get killed by him on sight. And some people just don't pronounce words the way that the characters say them, myself included.
Widely disliked character among players who follow his questline, is suspected by some to have killed our maiden. Evidence supporting this theory includes his suspicious knowledge of her fate and his presence at the beginning. His questline even involves sacrificing a maiden, adding weight to this super dark possibility. God, this is like CSI.
To the round table hold, you are fated, it seems, to die in obscurity.
Elden Ring is reality.
The fallen leaves tell a story.
Now, this theory has had a nice bow wrapped around it already, but it was so important to the player/game connection that it feels worthwhile talking about. Fan curiosity is sometimes deliberately rewarded by game designers, but more often fans uncover truths inadvertently. Before Elden Ring's release, a popular theory suggested that the Elden Ring represented the very concept of reality within the game's universe. According to this theory, the Elden Ring was the foundation of life, death, and rebirth, central to the game's story. This idea was nearly spot on. In the game, the Elden Ring indeed governs existence, encompassing death, immortality, and the mechanics of the world. The quest to restore the shattered Elden Ring drives the entire plot, validating the fans' early speculation almost entirely.
And in the night of the Black Knives, Godwyn the Golden was first to perish.
Painted World Theory.
So with Elden Ring is reality, does that mean like the Elden Ring is reality in the game world, or did he really mean the Elden Ring is reality? It definitely seems like the former, that the Elden Ring is the basis for reality, but I mean, that's kind of true. It's not theories that might actually be true. I mean, it is a little bit arguable that there's presumably a lands between before Metter or the Elden Ring landed there, but it's not like we would ever be able to see what that was like, unfortunately.
Paintings hold a notable role in Elden Ring and other Soulsborne games, even though some players in Elden Ring may have never even interacted with them. In Elden Ring, they serve as collectibles that guide players to hidden rewards when the depicted locations are found. However, there may be a deeper link between the Lands Between and the Dark Souls universe through the concept of paintings. In the conclusion of Dark Souls 3's Ringed City DLC, the painting woman begins creating a new world using the blood of the Dark Soul. This theory speculates that this new world might eventually become the Elden Ring world, the Lands Between, bridging the two universes in a symbolic way. This is as fun as a fan theory gets, really. Branching endings.
Yeah, maybe with the Night Rain connections, we'll be able to confirm or deny the Painted World theory. Wait, branching endings? Is it because we're in an Erd tree? You're welcome.
Strap in, Elden Ring offers 6 possible endings, each leaving the world in a unique state. Among them, 3 endings have sparked speculation among Soulsborne fans as potential preludes to other games in the series. Some fans suggested thematic connections between these endings and the earlier Soulsborne titles. The Frenzied Flame ending, which annihilates the Golden Order, is theorized to set the stage for the undead scene in Dark Souls. The Age of Stars ending, with its focus on lunar magic and the moon replacing the Erdtree, is theorized to set the stage for Bloodborne. Lastly, the Destined Death ending, while a subtler link, is theorized to set the stage for Demon Souls. Can you connect the other endings with other From Software games? Have a crack, because it's fun.
Y'all know that the Armored Core heads are being like, Garrulus Goldmask, not the YouTuber. He went on to create the ending for Armored Core because it's the perfect game for the perfect order.
Spirits of Children.
Oh, I know. Can you take this little one along with you?
The Land Between is filled with big, evil assholes and lovely little friends. Some monsters attack the tarnish on sight, others bail pretty damn quick, and some remain indifferent unless provoked. Among these are the floating jellyfish scattered across the world, which may have particularly dark backstories. Some players may have discovered small graves linked to the spirit ash jellyfish Aurelia and her sister, suggesting these creatures could be the reincarnated spirits of children who perished in the lands between. With this haunting possibility in mind, it might be worth reconsidering before attacking these serene jellyfish for their small rune rewards. Or hit them harder. I don't know how you feel about dead kids. Jesus, that's dark even for me.
Yeah. No time to waste. Let's see the stars.
I mean, this one's pretty straightforward. We can't say whether or not all of the jellyfish were kids, so I guess that makes it might actually be true, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is one to me that is true. So this is a list of 9 at the very least. They lied to me.
The Divine Towers. The map of Elden Ring is vast, with most cities and key locations placed in asymmetrical, organic patterns, except for the 6 Divine Towers. Those damn towers. Players are still trying to find hidden secrets amongst those towers, but think about this. These towers are precisely positioned, and drawing a line between them leads to a specific point in the center of the map. This central location is weirdly currently obscured by a large cloud. Fans are eagerly speculating about From Software's future plans for Elden Ring, and this hidden location could be setting the stage for intriguing storylines, possibly in their future DLC? We'll see. Ranni's plans.
What do you mean future? Oh, he means like another future DLC? But this definitely came out before, or I mean way after Shadow of the Erdtree came out. This is weird. Is this a re-upload? I don't know. Have we had any references to the DLC yet? I don't think so. I know, he talks about Mesmer. Okay, so maybe he just doesn't believe that the Shadowlands are in the clouds.
I am the witch Rani. I stole death long ago, and search now for the dark path.
Rani the Witch, the former shard bearer of the Elden Ring, is a central character in the game. She has a deep questline that
Former shard bearer. I hate it.
reveals much about her and the world's history. However, she may have played a more significant role in the events of the Shattering than she admits. According to a theory that is circulated on Reddit, Rani could have been the catalyst for the chain of events that led to the Elden Ring's destruction. The theory suggests that in defiance of the greater will, she ended her own life to break free from the influence of her great rune, and she attempted to liberate other shard bearers, ultimately contributing to the Shattering. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from Mojo.
All right, thanks, Elden Enthusiast, for inflicting us with that brain rot of that last theory that might be true, which is certainly not true. Because I mean, it's like 20% true. So Rani and the demigods were not shard bearers before the Night of the Black Knives, because we're told that they got newfound taint of their powers after claiming shards of the Great Runes in auxiliary materials, which, you know, is the best way to learn anything about the lore. And that's unfortunate, but it's also very arguable whether or not Rani ever had a Great Rune. And some people believe that she did because of what Gideon says. And I say it's because Gideon says that it's really not very trustworthy at all. He just thinks that's what happened because that's what seemed logical to him. But Rani was presumably dead before the ring was shattered. So unless she claimed a shard of the Great Rune and then got rid of it before we ever met her, like, she's unlikely to have had the rune. But I know people will have disagreements with me on that front. Mojo's a horrible channel name. You're just owning him as an Aussie? No. He can be a New Zealander? Okay. ChatGPT wrote the script? I mean, it might have. But, I mean, they did at least properly cite where they were getting their sources from. So they had that going for them.
Mojo Plays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of our latest videos.
Yeah, so some of these were kind of like nothing burgers, more or less true. Others are just not great. But I mean, honestly, for the most part, it was pretty okay for the video. It wasn't as bad as I was fearing it was going to be. Because, you know, fear the old lore. Anyway, let's go ahead and check out Godfrey is Not the Father with Mori. I mean,
I'm beginning to
Living Jar Cletus. Starting Meow.
I'm beginning to believe that Godwyn wasn't actually Godfrey's son.
Wait, did we watch this a long time ago? We might have, actually.
I've actually thought this for a while. However, before the DLC, I didn't really have a good reason. Formerly, with the knowledge that George R.R. Martin played a large part in the lore of this game, I sort of just felt like America, Godfrey, and Godwyn sort of gave off Cersei, Robert Baratheon, and Jaime Lannister vibes. Or even substitute Jaime for Joffrey. And that's pretty much it. That was pretty much the whole reason. And again, this is not a good reason for making such a bold claim, which is why I never made it. But as I've taken the time to absorb the lore of this game far more in depth than I had previously, and especially with the release of the DLC, I feel like this is a theory that can certainly be argued. But I'd like to start this video by explaining why it has always been assumed by most that Godwyn is Godfrey's son. Because for those who don't know, Godwyn is never explicitly stated in-game to be Godfrey or America's son.
I'm pretty sure we have watched this, and I'm probably going to be repeating myself from the last time I watched it. So yes, technically he is correct that we don't have like a one-to-one explicit reference saying that Godwyn is of America and Godfrey's union. However, he is described as being a scion of the Golden Bough, with that most likely being a reference to a scion of the Golden Lineage. And we are told in the Anka rune held by Godric, of all people, that Godfrey and his children were the first demigods and his descendants were the Golden Lineage. So that would ipso facto kind of make Godwyn most likely to be Godfrey and Marika's child. But technically he is right. There is enough wiggle room where you could wiggle yourself out of anything with enough effort.
To start with the obvious, according to finger reader Enya, quote, "The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika." The finger reader Crone in the Deep Root Depths states, quote, "O Lord Godwyn, such cruelty, such humiliation. My poor sweet lordling should have died a true death, as first of the demigods to die, as a martyr to destined death. But why must it yet bring such disgrace, a scion of the Golden Bough, sentenced to live a death?" The Prince of Death's cyst also refers to Godwyn as a scion of the Golden Bough. And he is obviously referred to as Godwyn the...
Oh, yeah, we've definitely watched this. I left my own like on it, so apparently I liked it well enough.
Golden many times throughout the game, by Rajier, Ronnie in the story trailer, the Remembrance of the Lich Dragon, and many more. So even though it's never explicitly stated that he is Godfrey's son, it's safe to say that he was, or was at least considered to be, a part of the Golden Lineage.
Alright, case is solved. Let's go ahead and check out something else with the limited amount of time we have left on the channel. Since I've watched that one before with you guys. You know what? I've had this one on the list forever. Let's check out The Importance of Demon Souls. Y'all got bamboozled. It's April 5th. The new April 1st. Wait, who's this by? Oh, it's unlisted? Should I not watch this then? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe they have another version of it. No? Alright, so then I'll probably just remove this from the thing. Maybe they don't want to have people watch it anymore. Dang it. Alright, let's go with something completely out of left field with explaining Dark Souls 2's most controversial mechanic, agility. Because I vaguely know what it's about, but there's enough controversy about it that I wouldn't mind knowing more.
Today, we will be going over one of Dark Souls 2 most controversial
And this is by Metalhead.
and misunderstood mechanics. Rolling. The main complaint surrounding rolling usually boils down to misunderstood hitboxes and two stats, ADP, also known as adaptability, and AG.
You gotta admit, blowing up the icons does not do them any favors.
L, also known as agility. You may have seen the meme ADP bad, but contrary to popular belief, ADP only has partial control over your iframes and works in conjunction with attunement to determine your overall agility, which is the stat that regulates your total iframe.
Yeah, but I mean, for most people that are not going to be casting spells, attunement is just a dead stat, so I don't blame them for not leveling up. Although I have to admit, attunement is kind of stacked in Dark Souls 2 because you get more spell casts, which is pretty damn good, and you get more agility, which is actually good in that game, or for that game, I should say. Like, not good in the game, but you know what I mean. Like, it's an actually useful stat for once.
Let's start with some common misconceptions surrounding ADP and iframes, though later on in this video, we will address some of the infamously misunderstood hitboxes of Dark Souls 2, like the Pursuer grab attack.
Gotta love it. Agility explained.
One of the most common complaints surrounding adaptability is the misconception that you have to level it excessively high early or reach certain arbitrary amounts to be able to properly roll.
Yeah, so my first time playing through Dark Souls 2, I mean, I didn't play through it. My first time attempting to play through Dark Souls 2, I didn't really level up attunement plus the other one, agility, whatever it's called, adaptability. And it didn't really bother me that much with the rolls. To me, Dark Souls 2's problems have been largely related to movement and time to complete actions. To me, I would almost feel more comfortable playing Dark Souls 2 at like 1.25 or even maybe like 1.5 speed, just because it just feels that slow to me.
What you need to look at is the substat called agility, which is responsible for item consumption speed. The speed at which you are able to raise your guard for blocking. Swapping between your main hand and offhand weapons. And most importantly, your iframes. Agility is raised primarily by leveling adaptability and to a lesser extent attunement. We will go over that in detail a bit later.
Investigating into attunement. So it took her 8 levels to hit 92 agility with adaptability and 24 levels to reach that with attunement.
To fully understand why agility is important and how it correlates with adaptability and attunement, let's break it down.
Hell yeah. No idea what this is.
When you start Dark Souls 2, your player character will have 7 to 9 iframes depending on your starting class.
That's funny, Bandit has the
worst.
worst.
How much investment you would like to make into the iframes of your roll. With this in mind, agility has specific breakpoints in which you gain iframes. They are the stopping points you will want to meet as you level. Though there are many of them, the only breakpoints that will be relevant for your gameplay are 92, 96, 99, and rarely 105 agility. These numbers are important stopping points because you do not gain additional iframes between breakpoints. As an example, having 95 agility is the same as having 92 agility in terms of iframes. We will be going over a few more breakpoints for the other functions of agility later to show you what they do and why they aren't important. For now, let's take a closer look at the relevant agility breakpoints. The first major breakpoint.
Honestly, I really don't mind the idea behind having agility in the game. I just think it really sucked that it was tied to adaptability, and I'm fine with it being tied to attunement. I guess like adaptability just doesn't really feel good to level, whereas it almost feels like more of a bonus when you're already focusing on getting attunement for spell slots and stuff. So maybe like I wouldn't have minded it if it was dex related, because that can make sense. Dex or attunement. Although I guess dex also goes into casting speed, doesn't it? So that'd probably be too strong. You'd probably have to overcompensate with strength, I guess.
92 agility will grant you a total of 10 iframes, and it is the first milestone that you should try to reach early on into the game. The second major breakpoint, 96.
Adaptability also increases poise. Okay, I didn't know that. Is poise even good in Dark Souls 2? I don't remember. I couldn't stand the melee enough to remember well enough, but from my vague recollection, I don't ever really remember anybody shilling for poise-based builds in DS2 quite the same way that they would do for like Giant Dad in DS1. Not really. You need a lot of it? Okay.
Agility grants you 11 iframes, which is the same amount as every roll type in Dark Souls 1 except for the roll type associated with Darkwood Grain Ring. 96 agility is what you should aim for in the mid-game.
Man, this music is comfy as hell though.
The last relevant breakpoint for iframes is 99 agility, which will grant you 12 iframes and is more than you get for normal roll types in Dark Souls 1. 99 agility should be your final goal in the late game, as it is more than enough to comfortably roll every attack in the game. You should not have your agility between any of these breakpoints, as it is a waste of stat points that would be better spent elsewhere. With all of this in mind, the way agility is calculated in-game is fairly complicated, and the in-game menu tends to not always be truthful when displaying true values. We know that agility is leveled with both adaptability and attunement. Adaptability will level your agility 3 times faster than attunement will. Your adaptability investment is multiplied by 0.75, while your attunement investment is multiplied by 0.25. Then, these resulting values are added together and rounded to the nearest whole number to determine your overall agility investment. This number then correlates with the numbers in this chart to determine what tier of agility investment you are at.
That's a lot of math. I'm not going to read that out loud. Agility display isn't always accurate.
Due to all the math happening behind the scenes, the agility displayed in your player status screen might not always accurately reflect the in-game math. We can see this clearly because when your agility is calculated to be less than 85, it will be set to a value of 85 regardless.
Good job, FromSoft.
As an example, when you start the game before picking your class and character name, you will be at soul level -44, but your agility will still be displayed as 85. A more practical example of this is the fact that Bandit, Warrior, and Cleric class all have 85 agility displayed in the menu. Though Bandit class actually has a lower amount of iframes. Bandit class starts with 2 attunement and 3 adaptability, which calculates to agility investment tier 2, giving 7 iframes on rolls.
Chadwick, you said the lighting is so weird. Did you ever see that Dark Souls 2 lighting mod? It actually looks pretty good, but yeah, I don't know.
On the other hand, Warrior and Cleric class are calculated to tier 5 investment, which is 8 iframes on rolls, though all 3 classes have in-menu values
Oh, you haven't touched Dark Souls 2 at all? It's a trip.
of
That's all I can
85
say.
agility.
I know some people actually prefer vanilla Dark Souls, and pretty much all you can get now is Scholar of the First Sin, unless you really go hunting for the first game. So, well, the first version of the game. But, yeah. With that horn said, if nothing else, this video has great lo-fi beats to study to playlist. Yeah, it does.
This means that when
Rachel says the original is better, but Scholar has better mods. I mean, that makes sense because Scholar's got the more robust systems going for it. Is her game modded? Why does Shadowlot look so different? Are they in motion? Are they motion blurred? Maybe that's part of it. Anyway, I know we had two hit good as a member of the community. He was trying to play through both games simultaneously and got burnt out pretty quick. I think he got up to like Shrine of Amana, and he was enjoying the original Dark Souls 2 more so than Scholar of the First Sin. So, yeah, it's kind of wild how kind of worse they made a lot of the enemy spawn placements in Scholar of the First Sin, because I imagined it would have been the opposite case, that Scholar of the First Sin would have improved on things, but no, it actually made it worse. Go figure.
starting as Bandit, you will need to invest more points to get yourself to 86 agility compared with these other classes that start with higher adaptability and attunement.
Scholar is almost like a Kaizo remix of DS2. It's not quite to that level, but I get what you mean, though. Rachel liked Aldia, but you could do without the Forlorn.
Ranges, when your adaptability and attunement are both 99, your agility will
I can't even really imagine the base game of DS2 without having Aldia.
Be set to a value of 120 as the maximum.
Like, there'd be no pointing of, like, where to go at all.
Using gear that boosts adaptability and therefore agility will do nothing when you reach this point.
Just the cat. Agility for casters.
When investing into adaptability or attunement, it is important to check your agility.
So, Halo of the Sun said you haven't played DS2. Should you seek out the original DS2 instead of Scholar of the First Sin? Oof, that's a rough question. Honestly, like, Scholar of the First Sin does have the DLCs, and there are cool elements in the DLCs, and it's probably more of a pain than it's worth going to find the original if you don't have it. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really remember how difficult that would be. But if you already have the vanilla DS2, I'd say play it if you want, but just don't force yourself. All right, Phantom Leaves, thanks for joining us, and you have a good night. Wait, you can still access the DLC in the original? I thought the DLCs were released with Scholar of the First Sin. Anyway.
If you are a caster...
Oh, wait, no, that's true, because you could buy the DLCs individually. I guess I don't know how that worked. Because Aldia got patched in. Oh, okay. I think I figured it out. So you have vanilla Dark Souls 2, which is different from 1.0 Dark Souls 2, because they patched in Aldia kind of like the same way that Volter got patched into Bloodborne with, I think, 1.06. Or is it 1.05? Anyway. We're all good.
Or have significant investment into attunement, you will find that you won't have to invest into adaptability nearly as much. It is a balance between the stats. Never level adaptability arbitrarily because some Reddit post told you to.
What did that say?
Post told you.
With 16 attunements, you'll only need 16 adaptability to reach 96 agility.
To.
other AGL functions.
The additional and less relevant functions of agility include weapon swap speed,
Didn't she already say this stuff?
blocking speed, item consumable speed.
I guess it'd be nice if she had more comparisons, like direct comparisons. Just for the visuals. God, I hate how long it takes to heal for anything in Dark Souls 2.
And iframes on backsteps and landing rolls.
I will say, though, that I am actually a really big fan of the jump of DS2. It's pretty damn good. Best of all three of the Dark Souls games.
Weapon swap speed determines the speed at which you are able to swap your right and left hand weapons. This multiplier scales from 120% at minimum agility up to 145% at maximum agility. This is not a function
Hey, we got our swap speeds. I honestly can't really tell that much of a difference.
that is worth caring about, as it will not meaningfully impact your gameplay in a noticeable way.
Okay, there we go.
Blocking speed is the rate at which you can bring up your guard for the purposes of blocking attacks. This multiplier scales from 100% at minimum agility up to 150% at maximum agility. This is also...
Is that like a 1 or a 2 frame difference? Like, I can see that this one is slightly faster, but that's...
also not a function that is
seems
worth caring
negligible
about at all.
Okay. Item use speed. There's a video in the game came out with a guy pairing the double pursuers at 99 adaptability, and he just dodged through all their double attacks.
Item consumables.
DS2 had the best netcode for multiplayer. That doesn't surprise me, because everybody always said that Dark Souls 2 PvP was the best.
Speed is the rate at which you consume items such as Estus or life gems. It is a misconception that this is a critical function, and causes many players to level agility to needlessly high levels, most of the time well beyond the level of agility where item use speed caps. The item consume speed multiplier only changes between 90 and 100 agility, meaning the critical iframe breakpoints fall between these numbers. Since 99 agility is your final breakpoint in terms of iframes, it is not worth it to get to 100 agility to cap your item use speed. 99 agility puts you at 117% item use speed, while 100 puts you at 120 item use speed. This 3% difference is barely perceptible. To put this in further perspective, at the lowest possible agility, your Estus consume speed is 2.5 seconds. At 100 agility, it takes just over 2 seconds to complete the Estus consumption animation.
That actually does seem kind of like a really big deal in a game like Dark Souls 2.
The final, less relevant functions of agility are the increase of iframes on backsteps and landing rolls. Though these functions, along with the ones previously mentioned, are fairly useless and are not worth considering when investing into agility.
Pursuer and other grab attacks.
Another misconception surrounding rolling pertains to videos like this one of the pursuer grab attack, where a player seemingly rolls through the attack and gets grabbed anyway. It is easy to blame this on ADP or bad hitboxes, since a majority of players do not understand the mechanics behind this footage. Let's slow it down to show what is happening here.
Oh, if she somehow defends this, to me this is indefensible. Like, I almost don't even care what she has to say. I'm gonna be like, nah, you wrong.
As you can see, this player's foot is getting clipped by the grab hitbox, as they don't have eye.
It's the foot? Are you joking me, bro? There, he got your foot. Because you have no iframes. Okay.
Iframes at this point in their roll. This is not the fault of adaptability, agility, or the hitboxes, but is an issue with the grab animations and the player themselves. The way grab attacks work across the entire Souls franchise can be very visually comical.
That's pretty bad.
You can see janky grab animations happen in other entries in the franchise with the grab attacks of Iron Golem, Dancer of the Boreal Valley.
At least that one, her hand went through the player first, and that was like an actual animation type thing rather than like a full-on hitbox type thing.
Gaping Dragon, and more.
Wait, what was that? That sucks. My dude just got...
This is because the roll animation is prioritized
grabbed.
to finish first, while the grab attack animation is queued. This causes the roll animation to play out fully, then the grab attack animation plays, making the player seemingly teleport to the end of the pursuer's sword. Dark Souls 2 hitboxes are considered to be...
Yeah, Alon's grab is also pretty bad for the same reason.
...poor, as people aren't able to see the actual hitboxes and are judging based...
They should have had the grab work only on the torso since it impales you. That would be way more effort and would make way more sense. It just got your hitbox. So the fact that your feet is part of your hitbox is perhaps part of the problem. The other body parts could just be regular damage. I think like there's merit to having your feet be part of your hurt box because you could get clipped from like glancing attacks. Dead zoning was definitely a thing in Dark Souls 1 where you didn't lock onto a player and you would use an attack that would kind of have a sweeping range so that way it would like more or less guarantee a hit from a spot that they couldn't block. Because it would like hit their foot rather than where they would be shielding from and whatnot. As a programmer, it wouldn't. But I mean, it takes time. And time is the bane of all projects. You should know that. And effort and notice. And attention. Notice is what I meant.
Animations.
Anyway.
To put this in further perspective, let's look at the grab attacks from the perspective of strafing. You can see that the player character is extremely close to the sword, but is not getting grabbed because they are not actually getting hit, unlike with the player's foot earlier. With Hitbox Visualizer on, we can see that the hitbox is nicely aligned with the sword. The issue in this popular video does not stem from bad hitboxes or bad rolling mechanics, but the personal skill of the player in the video coupled with the way animations are queued.
She says it's a skill issue, but I mean, the fact that so many people find it to be egregious probably hints at a bigger issue that there is something a little bit egregious about that. So you could say, like, what if they just raised the stabbing hitbox to be a little bit higher so that way it didn't catch their feet? But I mean, it's such an edge case that the devs probably weren't even worried about it, or it probably wasn't on their radar. It might be a better way of saying it. But I mean, there also just seems to be a bunch of issues in general with like how rubber bandy it feels to get grabbed from the tiniest part of your hitbox being in, or tiniest part of your hurt box being in somebody's hitbox. So, like, I've got a clip of me getting eaten by the damn Dark Staff Mimic in Brightstone Cove, Seldora. And it's apparently because my hand is too close to the Mimic when it wakes up, even though... Crap. I might not have the footage on my computer anymore. It's on my channel somewhere. Yeah, I don't have any DS2 footage queued up in the background. Okay, it's all good. So maybe it would have been smarter for them to just have like anti-rubber band technology where if like the main mass of the player was so far away from the hitbox that they would get teleported back into it, but I don't know. With that horn said, it probably wouldn't take long, but on the other hand, never underestimate how janky games code might be. Halo said, in their experience, stuff like that happens due to project documentation. The programmer likely never knew how the collision detection to be used by others. Yeah, that makes total sense. They left the implementation up to the programmer. The Witcher 3 horse gets stuck in grass. That makes sense. That's probably a lot of the lack of communication between like level design and mount design and stuff like that. But that's, you know, beyond my wheelhouse there.
Additional reasons this grab attack hit the player is that they are at a higher equipment load percentage, reducing the distance of their roll. When a player is over 70% of their equipment load, they will fat roll, which will reduce roll distance even more severely. In this case, the player having a higher equipment load percentage contributed to their foot getting clipped by the grab attack of Pursuer. When replicating this footage with hitbox viewers on, we had to get to 69% of equipment load while also having low agility to fail rolling this attack in the same way. In addition to roll distance being reduced, if you are wearing armor that you do not meet the requirements for, or if you are rolling without enough stamina, your iframes will be reduced on those rolls.
Your iframes get reduced if you don't have enough stamina? That's wild.
Be mindful that your stamina regeneration speed will be negatively affected by your current percentage of equipment load, meaning that your stamina will regenerate slower while you are heavy, oftentimes leading to rolling without enough stamina.
Gotta say, that was interesting camera placement for the female model compared to the ox on the right. Panic rolling.
Another thing to keep in mind is that many enemies have delayed attacks that are intentionally slower, which keeps their hitboxes in contact with the player model for a longer period of time. These kind of attacks can catch players off guard early on due to the lack of iframes and instinct of most players to roll as soon as they see an attack winding up. You can see this clearly happening in the original Pursuer grab video. This is commonly known as panic rolling.
Honestly, I don't think that roll was egregious whatsoever.
Original Pursuer grab video. This is
so he like finished doing the wind up. So he's starting to go back to go into the animation. You already see him start to flip it. That's not a bad roll. That's a pretty good roll. Honestly, there. Like, that was not a panic roll. Like, they didn't move as soon as he started the animation.
Known as panic rolling.
That's just not knowing the timing.
A reliable way to play around these scenarios is to...
So I guess, like, from a meta perspective, you could say it's a bad roll for that attack specifically in a kind of literal sense. But, I mean, from a game design, player-friendly stance, I don't think that was a bad roll whatsoever.
To stay calm and time your rolls. Learn the directionality of the attacks you are trying to avoid. Oftentimes, you can roll diagonally off to the side or roll into an attack, causing you to be able to fully avoid getting hit while creating crucial distance. Staying calm will help you keep yourself safe from long hitboxes and follow-up attacks. Now that we know how agility and rolling works in Dark Souls 2, the stat and rolling as a whole might not seem so daunting. Be sure to let us know how you feel about agility in the comment section, and make sure to check out our other videos on Dark Souls 2 mechanics.
Alright, so I think that was a good video. It was very informative. Turns out I actually knew a lot more about adaptability and agility than I thought I did. Obviously, like, I'm not going to remember the legitimate or the literal numbers for each like of the break points, but that's pretty good. I did learn a bit more about the consumables and stuff. And I've certainly done my fair share of complaining about Dark Souls 2. I've got the one video on my channel that's like comparing the chugging speeds of Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Now, I don't necessarily care so much about the animation of chugging as much as it is like how long it actually takes to get healed fully. Come on, little girl, right here. Come on. Come on. There. But yeah. Long story short, casters have it much, much easier in DS2, provided you abuse the hell out of the binoculars and snipe things from a distance. I didn't really do too much close-ranged casting in that game. Rachel, as much as you love DS2, most of it isn't well communicated to the player. Yeah, I think that's a pretty big problem with like a lot of the Dark Souls games, and Elden Ring doesn't do much better either. I think Sekiro probably has the best tutorialization of the games. Dog attack, something like that, yeah. We call them invasions around here. Chadwick, you think that the reason the females have more androgynous character models is more about armor clipping and rigging? I mean, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. But to be fair, I mean, they do be swinging around a lot of weapons, so they got to have those broad shoulders, you know? So, okay, folks, I want to thank you all for joining me on another night of looking at lore and game videos. I appreciate it. I did link this into the chat if you wanted to give Metalhead some support. I'm sure she would enjoy it. So that'll conclude tonight's episode. Hopefully I'll catch you again on the next one at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.